my fellow Westorians. Welcome to Valar Rereadis for Dunk and Egg. It's the Sworn Sword, Part 4. Let's see what today brings us, my fellow Westorians? With me today is Jim McGeehin, a.k.a. something like a lawyer. He's functioning kind of like a closer here. We're finishing off the Sworn Sword. We're bringing in a heavy hitter. Sean's not available this weekend. And we have had a lot of great times with Jim in the past, so you're just kind of a natural fit here. We've always had good discussions, and you had some great points about this story that we were talking about offline, and, it just kind of made sense to say, hey, well, we need someone for this week, and Jim's got good thoughts. We've had him on before. It always goes well. Boom, there you go. So welcome back, my friend.
Nice, happy confluence of factors. And I'm really happy I was able to actually get in because Sworn Sword is my favorite of the Dunk and Egg tales. I think they're all great, but Sworn Sword is probably my favorite. And I think part of it is because it is a medieval Western.
Yeah, and that is a really good point. Yeah, you mentioned that to me. That's one of the things I wanted to get into. We'll actually start with that after we get through this other part of the intro. Because I brought that up with Sean as well, kind of as a lead-in to knowing that we would have this opportunity to discuss it with you. I wanted to get a few of his thoughts on it because he's a movie guy, and he presenting him with that idea, I wanted to get his response, and he definitely agreed with your point on that. It did seem to fit really well. So that's cool. We'll get into that and a lot of other things. We've got a lot of things to wrap up here, and of course, a couple things we probably won't get to, but don't forget, folks, we're going to do a full Dunk and Egg wrap-up episode as we did sort of in the style of the end of book 1, the end of book 2, the end of book 3. We always do a wrap-up at the end of each one. So we'll do that for Dunk and Egg as well. Thanks to Nina, goodqueenally.tumblr.com. That's one L in Alley. Always providing us with a bunch of excellent thoughts and discussion points to get us going and give us lots of great things to talk about. Check out some of the recent articles on her blog. She's got a great take on Dunk's dream, the second dream. There's 2 dreams in this story. The first one, of course, is in Dorne. The second one is more of a romantic dream about Lady Rohan. She draws some comparisons to the myth of Artemis and Actaeon there as well, which is pretty cool. And as well as she takes questions there. One of the recent ones that I was interested in is what's going to happen when Tyrion and Dany meet for the first time? How's George going to approach that? Like, which POV is it going to be from? And how's it going to go? How's she going to react to him? How's he going to react to her? It's been built up a lot. So, yeah, we're going to have to wait and see, but she's got some good thoughts on how that might go. As well, I'd like to thank all the folks who join our discussion groups offline, like Discord and Slack and Facebook. And as well as Flick. Well, lots of great comments and discussions happening there. Each of those groups is a little different in terms of the technology, the setup of the forums, and the types of things that get discussed. Discord is a wide variety of topics. Flick is very focused on specifically what the next episode is only and not much else. Facebook is Facebook, so there's just lots of things going on there as well. And Slack is a bit smaller. And, take your pick. Or none of the above. You can take that pick, too, of course. Now, thanks as well to anyone who supports us on Patreon. We have been churning quite a while here. It's been a while since we started our first Patreon launch. And I think it's been about 5 years. We might have a 5-year anniversary or a 6-year anniversary coming out. I really should check into that. But it's been a great ride. We've got many more years ahead of us. So join us if you want to get a little bonus content, occasional shout-out, access to scripts, things like that. So yeah, Jim, let's start with your overall thoughts on the story. You said it's your favorite, and the medieval Western aspect of it is one of the things that really jumps out at you. So why don't you take it away? Tell us where that idea came from and what some of the aspects of it that led you to that comparison.
Well, so I have a theory with Dunk and Egg, and Dunk and Egg is basically George R. R. Martin taking either genres or individual stories that he likes and putting them into the Westerosi setting. With the Hedge Knight, it's clearly Ivanhoe. Yeah. This is a Western. The Mystery Knight, you're actually having a little bit of a crime thriller. And specifically, I'm thinking Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest. I mean, with the story is of a everyday Joe that happens to blunder into a secret conspiracy, which sounds an awful lot like the plot of Mystery Knight. And North by Northwest is a phenomenal film. It's one of Hitchcock's best.
Yeah.
But one of the things I really liked about this story is that it's small, it's focused, and it's really dialogue driven. I mean, it's surprising how much of the action is actually driven through essentially social confrontation. You have, the stand down between Dunk and the Widow Rohan. You have essentially the big climactic moment of, when Dunk goes to Eustace Osgrey and is like, you were actually part of the Blackfire, the Black Dragon. And so much of it is actually, I mean, there is the climactic scene at the end in the duel in the stream, but so much of this is actually dialogue driven, and it reminds me of a lot of the good bottle episodes you see in TV, where dialogue is driving the action because it's meant to actually cut down on the budget. Obviously, it's not really the same for when it comes to writing, but A Song of Ice and Fire, the main novel series, is an epic fantasy, and it has to be large in scope. I mean, it spans 2 continents. It spans so many, however many different POV characters. I mean, you need an appendix just to actually look at the number of people that are actually in this book. But, the Sworn Sword, there's a handful of characters, and of those handful of characters, maybe half of them are actually driving the story in some fashion or another. And all of the characters, even like Bennis the Brown, as a foil for Dunk, and as one of the worst elements of being a hedge knight, because he's essentially a bandit.
He is. He really gives us that example how it says that a lot of where's the line between hedge knight and brigand, and you really see.
Well, and we really should have known better, because he's called Sir Bennis the Brown. It's because he's a shit knight. And it took me let's just say an unflattering amount of time for me to make that realization. So, but you have all sorts. But these characters are just they play off each other really well. They're presented very strongly, and it's just there's so much fun in them. That's what I think that this one just really kind of clinches it for me in terms of it's just satisfying to read. And these are stories you can really read in one setting. Like these are all. But I blew through the Sworn Sword, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. That's how fast. That's how. I was reading and I was absorbing and all that other stuff. So I think that's what, But now to get into the whole Western thing.
Yeah, tell us about that. Yeah.
So I think most audience members are familiar with Westerns, but if you aren't, essentially it's a film genre. It's an American film genre. It deals with stories that are in the Old West, and there's just so much Western that I can see in here. And one of the biggest thing I see that is a Western is because of the setting itself. In Westerns, the actual environment is a character, and you see these wide panorama shots, these vistas, whether that be the Red Rock Mountains of Arizona or the prairie, or even the mountains of Colorado or something like that. And you can really see that when Dunk is going through Osgrey's lands, when he's patrolling, George R. Martin focuses a lot of time on just seeing the decay, the water, and the drought that are really hurting.
Yeah.
And that makes sense because the land is wounded. If we're looking at the whole Fisher King, let's take a Fisher King metaphor. The land was wounded by the Blackfire rebellions, brother fighting brother, and then it goes into the Great Spring Sickness, where when the people are suffering, where in the Fisher King, it's the king suffers, so the land suffers, whereas here it's the people are suffering, and so now the land is suffering. It's kind of his kind of metaphor with that.
Right on.
And similarly, the main conflict of the story is over use of the river. And a lot of Western stories actually have to deal with water rights and conflict over resources. You'll have the big cattle barons fighting against the plucky homesteaders, or you'll have, you'll have the one I'm thinking of specifically is Once Upon a Time in the West. It's a very, very famous Western, one of the best ones ever. And it was specifically about the water rights for a specific piece of land where the trains are going to go by. And so the trains need water, they need water for the locomotives and stuff like that. So whoever has that land is going to be poised to make the killing. So, of course, the big businessman is trying to muscle out the guy that actually owns it. And later his widow would come and take it and hire a gunfighter, help protect her and stuff like that. And so that's just kind of, and that's very much dealing with the Chequy water. Is Chequy water?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the Chequy water is essentially the sweet water once upon a time in the West. And then Dunk, thick as a castle wall, is our Western hero.
Mm-hmm.
He has a very strong sense of righteousness, very individualistic, very, very low class. Almost all of the Western heroes you see are rural, they're ranchers, they're farmers, or they're, wanderers who come in and take the martial star on for themselves. And so, he's not afraid to fight. He's not afraid to do any of this stuff. He's very clearly this Western hero, this frontier marshal, as he's patrolling the land of the Chequy water and of Standfast. And then you have the Widow Rohan. She's essentially the Jill McBain from Once Upon a Time in the West. And this is kind of where it shows as a revisionist. The classic Westerns had maybe 3 roles for women. They were either doting wives, damsels, or if they were villains, they were saloon girls. Because you couldn't say prostitute. It was the era of the Hays Code.
Right.
So they were saloon girls, and they were wicked, and they were meant to tempt the they were Jezebel types meant to tempt the hero off his path.
Right.
But in the revisionist westerns, and that's where you get your Clint Eastwood westerns, women started getting more prominent roles, and this is what you could see with the Widow Rohan. I mean, she's sexually active, clearly, because she had children. She's intelligent, and she demands to have what is hers. She's not going to sit back. She's essentially, I'm not going to be a background character. I'm a main character. Right. This is my land. These are my rights, and I'm going to assert them. And so that's always great with her. So, and a lot of the great actresses that portray female protagonists in Westerns, especially these revisionist Westerns, often have to deal with this sort of, you're a woman, so you don't have this property right or this, that, or that, the other thing. And, she's very clearly trying to say, no, that's not the way it goes. Then you have Eustace Osgrey. And Eustace Osgrey is this old soldier. You can actually see him as a Civil War veteran. Where he's pining away for this, and I mean that's the thing is that a lot of Westerns. Veteran, yeah. I mean a lot of these famous, believe it or not, the famous Old West guys, they say Old West veteran is a way to kind of explain in Western movies how they have their gunfighting skills. They actually, a lot of these famous Old West guys weren't actually even around when the Civil War happened. I mean, you had Wild Bill Hickok was a teamster for the Union Army. Virgil Earp was a soldier for the Union Army. But Wyatt Earp was too young. Billy the Kid, I think, was 6 when the Civil War was over. It's really only Jesse James and Wild Bill Hickok and Buffalo Bill Cody that were the big names that were actually involved in the Civil War. All the rest of them came afterwards. But the scars of the Civil War did, in fact, have a lot of things. Like when these Texas cattlemen would drive their cattle into Abilene, Kansas or something like that. And then there would be gunfights and they would break out because these Texas guys were from Texas, and these marshals were from Kansas.
There was history. Oh, yeah.
And there was, there was history. Even if these people didn't actually fight in the Civil War, the memory of it was carried from their fathers with
black
them.
And gray, black and red, it's blue and gray, or what have you. Yeah,
that's right. And you can kind of see Eustace Osgrey as probably a Confederate veteran because he's actually, he's actually. You can see some elements of the Lost Cause myth, and very much like the Outlaw Josie Wales, which is a kind of a fantasy retelling or fictional retelling of Jesse James that was a lot more sanitized. And I mean, we could talk about the history of Jesse James being sanitized here and back, but you can actually see, and George R. R. Martin is handling this, I think, very well because he's, Eustace Osgrey is talking about some of the things that he does feel that you can really empathize with, like the loss of his sons, but also he's saying, hey, he had women and Dornishmen in his court. And that's not sympathetic to the modern audience at all. And you can kind of see that where you can say, all right,
what's wrong with that?
Yeah. Exactly. There's a lot of stuff wrong with that. But at the same time, you could say, okay, well, I can empathize how he's lost his son and he feels this loss.
Yes.
And that's sympathetic and human.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of see Eustace Osgrey there.
Absolutely.
And then so everything culminates in essentially the final gunfight, which is the showdown in the stream. And it's very clearly a duel.
Yep.
So you can actually imagine, instead of being in the stream, they're on the street. And then, when the duel begins, both Dunk and the Longinch, am I saying it right?
Yeah,
The
Lucas
Longinch.
Longinch. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, the Lucas Longinch essentially draw their six shooters and try and shoot each other, but it gets into, instead of a tussle because the technology. But there's one scene in High Noon, which is the thing I was talking about. High Noon, the iconic shot is when Gary Cooper walks out on the street and he's alone, because in the whole movie there is no action scenes. There's no gunfights. I mean, plenty of westerns have gunfights. I mean, the Wild Bunch, the Peck and Paw westerns, and all that have great gunfights. But it's all about him trying to get a posse together to actually fight the outlaws when they come into town on the noon train, and all of the people don't want to help him. Like his deputy says, "Well, I'll only help you if you tell the town fathers that you want me to be the next marshal." So he's clearly doing it for self-serving. The people that do want to help him, one is the former retired marshal. He's so arthritic he can't even hold a gun. There's the town drunk who can't see straight, and there's like a 14-year-old boy who's brave. And then there's even a great thing when one guy volunteers and he sees nobody else volunteering and he steps back.
Kind of the opposite of what happens with Theon at Winterfell when Wex shames everyone. He's like, no, never mind.
The iconic shot is that the camera pans up and he walks out onto the street and he's alone. Oh. And that's that's in essence the Western hero. You do what is right, even if you're by yourself. So when the clock strikes noon, you are there. It's a classic staple of Western storytelling, and this is the movie where it was really established. And you can really see that with Dunk in a lot of these things where he says, I'm going to do the right thing. That's real. I mean, think about the Hedge Knight with the, who are you? A man who remembered his vows, and that makes him the Western hero.
Yeah. He was willing to go it alone, but of course the circumstances forced him to have fighting.
And he was able to.
Yeah.
And he was able to actually find a posse, and then you can actually see even this Baylor Breakspear, the West, being a Western hero as well. When he says, you were the man. I will stand. Mm-hmm. I will stand with you, even though he doesn't have equipment. He's. I mean, at what point? He's 40s, in his 40s or 50s now, I think, at that point. Maybe a little younger than that. But, he's not in his...
he's not...
Yeah, but he's not in his physical prime anymore.
Right.
So that's where I see with this Western. And similarly, you can see this High Noon thing with Brienne.
Oh,
yeah. And, if you were to put the no chance,
takes
no
place
choice
at an
moment,
inn.
Yeah. If you were to say no chance, no choice, you could put it into a Western.
Yeah, you could call it that. That's a good name for it.
It would, the camera would pan out and Brienne would be marching out, sword in hand, alone in the street as, Rorge and Biter and all those guys are out there.
Yeah.
And that, it wouldn't be out of place at all. It would be a perfect Western.
That's really good,
and so this is when I say the Sworn Sword is a Western. There's just so many nuggets of Western storytelling within the Sworn Sword.
That's great, man. Yeah, that's really good. That was a lot of great information, and you're right. There is a lot of that's like many rich veins of influence and homages there. And we know George is a fan of the genre, and he actually lives in Santa Fe, which has a history. It's also a place that has droughts and things like that, and not that he's probably lived through a lot of that in this time, in his life being a wealthy man, but he would know about the history of the place and the local history and what's happened there and be aware of things like that.
And he does love film. He owns a theater.
He does, and now he owns a railroad too. So hey, there you go. He probably owns some a stream or two as well somewhere in there.
And a lot of American creatives use the Western elements in their storytelling. It's not just Americans. I mean, Sergio Leone is a famous Western director, and he's Italian. The spaghetti Western is what it was called, and it was because it was all because of Sergio Leone, because he found something common. Similarly, you can see with the Kurosawa, he has a lot of. For example, The Magnificent Seven was pretty much an adaptation or blatantly stolen, depending on how you want to look at it, from the Ronin films. But Kurosawa did use Western elements in his Ronin films as well, because he was a fan of them as well. And you can see that there's unique elements to all of them, but there's also commonalities. And I mean, that's all these remixes are, is just taking elements and just splicing them together. You know, if like I said before, Dunk and Egg is all about playing with genres. So you take a genre and you give a couple of people silver wigs and maybe throw a dragon in there.
Yeah. And this genre had its heyday when George was a younger man. Like, this would have been one of the most popular genres when he was a younger person. So he would have a lot of experience watching this and seeing these actors. He's talked about it before. And it's not just him. There's a lot of creators, people who have made movies and written books and other creations that were heavily influenced by that generation of films and all the different offshoots of it. Like you said, it had a couple of iterations, and it lasted long enough to have a long cycle of a very robust cycle full of differences and ups and downs and changes and different style influences. Like you said, Japanese, Italian, etc. It wasn't just an American thing. And it's still there now. I mean, heck, the Mandalorian did a great homage to the Seven Samurai, which is, Magnificent Seven and all that.
Fantastic episode. And I mean, you can even see like a Cowboy Bebop is a space western, and that's Japanese animation.
Yeah.
And adaptation is unique. I mean, one of my favorite adaptations of Macbeth is called Throne of Blood, and it's adapted to feudal Japan.
Oh, that's cool.
It's actually it's a Kurosawa film, and it's essentially an adaptation of Macbeth. So I mean, adaptation it's great. You can see nice creative things, and I love to see, like I said, I love to read the Dunk and Egg tales because it shows George R. R. Martin's creativity and playing with these tropes of different genres.
Yeah, he gets to zoom in on it more because it's a micro setting. He gets to focus more on those details.
And you don't have, especially if it doesn't fit in the main novel series. If he says, "Oh, I want to make a short Western story," but I can't do it because the scope of the main novels is too large.
Yeah, like the closest thing he maybe gets to that is something like when Arya and Sandor stop over in that village for a while, and that's not really a Western. I mean, it kind of has a Western feel a little bit to it. It's less so than say this, but if he had lingered there for more than one chapter, it would have been too long. And this is, of course, this story is well longer than one chapter. It's more like 5 chapters in length, the rough equivalent. So you're right, and it is more self-contained too. Like this, you mentioned that it allows him to focus in on these micro details and things like that. And it is like a miniature Game of Thrones. One of the things I really love about that is how well it incorporates backstory and history. George is really good at that. And this story is full of that. It's rich. It's got that history. And just like a lot of Westerns would, as you said, a lot of these things were framed in the shadow of the Civil War or another major event that affects a lot of the characters. It's like part of their history and really colors their personality.
Yeah, I mean, what's that line? We are all just puppets dancing to the strings of our fathers.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, that's where these people all get their history from. I mean, so much of your context and framing of the events that happened is from ancestral memory and things like that, and things you're taught at the most formative ages, which are primarily going to be from your parents.
Yeah, and these are characters that when they were young, they didn't have decision-making power all that much. They were following in the footsteps, like you said, of the people that came before them. They were teenagers or young 20s. They had maybe ambitions and goals, but they're not the people pulling the strings, not at that point, if they ever are. And, we got Eustace Osgrey as... He's a former lord and now a knight. That's certainly not nothing, but he wasn't the reason the war happened. He had no say in who fought who. He was just another guy that joined, took his side, and what happened.
Yeah.
So let's talk about one of the education of a king theme. That's something that's a really big part of not just this story, but all 3 Dunk and Egg stories. Although it possibly features the strongest in this one. I think there's a case to be made that the Egg's education is perhaps the most poignant in this one, especially his one thing that a lot of you commenters, a lot of listeners have brought up is the way they relate on the topic of the peasants and attachments and their getting them in trouble, getting them in danger, putting them in danger, and how important that is as a king or as a leader of any kind, taking care of the people in your charge and treating them as people, not as objects, not as commodities, not as just like arrows in your quiver. And that's something that we talk about a lot, is Dunk being a lot smarter than he gives himself credit for. He's actually quite clever, the way he speaks with Egg, the things he selects that are important to discuss with him, as well as what we just talked about, how he resolves these problems. Like the way he turned it into a Western climax by forcing it into a duel rather than having it be a big conflict. That was pretty smart, right? That was clever.
Oh, yeah, and you can see it's not only clever because, for one, it's like, Widow Rohan could actually bring out more forces if she really wanted to, and all you've got are like the 3 Watts who can barely hold the sharpened stick that they give them that they laughingly call a spear.
Yeah.
Because it turns it into a one-on-one, which is better for Dunk because of his big size and big strength. Yeah. But also it's really motivated though by the human element, because he wants to spare the 3 Watts and stuff the fear. And I think in terms of the education of a king, this is where, because like say for example, if Egg was always a prince, he actually probably wouldn't be dealing with the levies and the mustering of them and anything. Those would probably be promulgated and down to, shire reeves and knights that are actually administering these small local towns. So he would never actually see the fear in their eyes when they first have to get, and they're in the muster yard and they're trying to train in anything like that. But Egg can't not see what's happening because he's with Dunk and he's traveling there. And so so in terms of this, it's the exposure that he's actually getting that he would have never gotten. And I mean, that was the big speech at the end of the Hedge Night about how, his meat is always rare and soft.
Yeah.
He's never had to deal with any of that. And you have with Varys's speech to Kevin, where he says he knows what it's like to be hunted and be afraid. Yep. And it's like, well, not really when you actually see the results when it goes on in the next book. But Egg is actually seeing the fear because he's seeing it out in the faces of the 3 Watts.
Yes.
And so it's just a great exposure for him to actually get this. And also because if Dunk is making sure that he learns it, that you can see the development of Egg going forward into something where, Egg it's not unreasonable to say that Dunk wants Egg to be Baelor.
Yeah, it's true. I think that's a great way to put it.
And he's trying, and Dunk says, I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do the best I can. And so he does it by acting like Baelor, especially when Egg can see.
Yeah, and one of the things that he has to learn that is interesting is how to get rid of some of his old prejudices, and where we learn where some of his prejudices or originate from. And this is a good place to start for us here. We have this talk about bastardy. We talked last time in episode 3 about how it didn't even occur to Egg that Dunk was a bastard. Had it occurred to him, he might have been prejudiced against him, because we see this prejudice come out and talking about how he's been educated on what bastards are. And this is it's kind of odd to think about, but let's have this quote first. Let's have Shay's going to read this quote from Egg talking about what he's learned.
The High Septon said all bastards are born to betrayal. Damon Blackfire, Bittersteel, even Bloodraven. Lord Rivers was more cunning than the other 2, he said, but in the end, he would prove himself a traitor too. The High Septon counseled my father never to put any trust in him, nor in any other bastards, great or small.
Bit of wordplay there, bastards great or small, and great bastards, of course. But now this is one of those prejudices kind of hard to wrap your head around. It's neat because there's prejudices we see in A Song of Ice and Fire that are similar to ones we see in the real world. But like, never in my life have I heard someone called bastard with their parentage in mind. Like, people just use that as kind of a generic insult, like, you bastard, and it's not even a very serious insult anymore.
I have been called a bastard.
Really?
I have.
All right,
been.
well, I guess I have to take that
rare,
back. Now I'm aware of
one.
Okay.
I think it's more of if you're very religious.
Okay. Yeah, so it's just my own experience, but I think the point stands that it doesn't have the weight in the real world that it has in Westeros, even if it does have more weight than I'm giving it credit for. So, because egg is just really like, it is the places where it does have more meaning, where it does carry more social weight or more social negativity, is in spots like this where people are. They care more about birth. And of course, the royal family is who cares more about birth than them. That's about as they care about it as perhaps as much as anyone, if not more so. And he's talking about two types of prejudice here. It's kind of a wrapped up version. It's not just the religious aspect of, oh, they weren't married. They didn't love each other. It wasn't a union of commitment. It wasn't all these things. And so the bastard clearly has all these negative qualities because of that. But there's also the classist aspect here where, well, here's another quote from Egg that you kind of really get the sense of where he's coming from, even though I suppose very few of us would agree with Egg, but still.
Lord Bloodraven's not even a real lord. That's just some stupid courtesy. He's a sorcerer and baseborn besides.
And baseborn besides. Of course, Dunk first corrects him on the difference between base and bastardborn, which is interesting that Egg would get that wrong. But Egg is saying Bloodraven's birth makes him lesser. He's just saying that. This micro-argument about who he is, it doesn't say he's unworthy of the job for in terms of marriage. It doesn't say, oh, he's not good enough. He's not competent. That's not, no one says anything like that. Egg doesn't anyway. So he's just kind of parroting what the High Septon said, maybe what Maekar said as well. This comes out as well with the sulking versus Roth argument. It's like, are you sulking or is he Roth? It's like, well, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of difference in this case, but it's a very interesting set of dot connecting as well, because it doesn't take much for Dunk to undo this, right? The fact that Egg realizes he's already trusting someone who's a bastard, it puts him into a spot where he's either got to completely rethink his attitude, or all of a sudden he has to start hating Dunk, which is not going to work because he loves Dunk. He's a big fan of the guy. So, and to his credit, he seems to, it seems to move him pretty quickly in the right direction. What do you think about this particular piece of education for Egg, learning about the difference between birth when you're a peasant doesn't matter as much as when you're highborn, does it?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because it needs to help to break Aegon's frame of reference of the aristocrat. If he's actually going to be Baelor, he needs to break this frame. And in the aristocracy, because of dynastic succession, legitimate marriage versus bastards is very important because it actually determines property inheritance and succession. But I mean, it's also this idea that he's if Egg has to look past to see what everything is, because that's exactly what Baelor did.
Yeah.
Baelor's the one who looked past the fact that when he said, "Yes, I broke lances against Arlen of Pennytree," and it's like, who cares about Arlen of Pennytree? He was some hedge knight, but clearly Baelor remembered. So obviously, the distinction of what you do is more important than what your birth is. And so that's what that lesson that Dunk is trying to instill in Egg, is that what you do is more important. And similarly with, it's also kind of interesting because, again, this whole baseborn, Bloodraven being baseborn, Egg's smart. He probably is saying it because he's repeating it. Mm-hmm. He hears it from somebody who's trying to insult Bloodraven.
Yeah.
And it's not specifically against that, but it's like, same with he's a sorcerer and baseborn besides, and this. So clearly being baseborn is bad, being a sorcerer is bad, hence why they do that.
Yeah. And this High Septon, by the way, that is probably the one who said all these things, is probably the same guy that Septon Sefton worked with, right? That's because Septon Sefton worked at the Capitol. The High Septon died during the spring sickness. It's possible we're talking about two different High Septons, but it's almost certainly the same guy. And, well, the one thing the High Septon is right about, giving someone a title doesn't change their nature, but the problem isn't that. It's their reckoning of their personality in the first place based on their birth is the problem, not the idea that the title changes them. And Maekar, to his credit, apparently doesn't fully agree with this High Septon either, where we get the impression that he does from this, but this is not firsthand information, and obviously Maekar later keeps Bloodraven on his hand, which might have something to do with politics and power, things like that. There's a lot that will have changed in the meantime. We're at this point in the timeline, we're 11 years away from Maekar becoming king, so it's a lot can change in that time. Maekar's opinion of Bloodraven can change. Maekar's opinion on Bloodraven may not have been as intense as we thought because it's all second, third-hand information. This comes back to some of the Stannis-Maekar parallels. Merit over birth. Stannis chooses Davos, and then Stannis also has Melisandre as an advisor, which is a little similar to Bloodraven advising Maekar in that there's a lot of mistrust there. There's the magic. There's the same coloring, the white skin and the red, exterior and all that. So a lot of parallels there. Maekar, Stannis, there's a lot going on. But of course, the first act of Egg's reign will be to arrest Bloodraven for the dishonorable execution of Aenys Blackfyre. So it's possible Egg still has some bitterness or negativity towards Bloodraven by the time that rolls around. But on the other hand, it's
probably because he executed Aenys.
It's a fair charge.
It's dishonorable and all that other stuff. And I could imagine that Bloodraven or Aegon felt that if he didn't do anything, then government, the Iron Throne's legitimacy would just be irreparably shattered.
Yeah.
And so he needs to assert that this was Bloodraven's doing, and he wasn't acting as an agent of the crown. And in fact, he was sullying the agent of the crown. The crown.
Absolutely.
Denigrating the honor of the king could actually be a real arrestable charge in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, it's not quite treason, or would you call that treason? Because the reason I bring this up is because of the High Septon's prediction. He says, Lord Rivers was more cunning than the other two, he said. But in the end, he would prove himself a traitor, too. And I don't think this is quite treason, but it's close enough. It's like, yeah, he did prove himself, unworthy.
It depends on how the characters in universe would conceive of treason.
Yeah.
If they said that, you're acting against the integrity of the state, if he specifically acted to weaken the state and put himself in power, which probably isn't true, but that doesn't mean people can't say it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would argue that's not treason, but it's close enough to the High Septon's point, as a mark of semi-foreshadowing there. Like, it did sort of come to pass. Egg did have to take action to remove the guy from power. It's maybe a dot to connect there. Well, let's move on to another recurring theme here is the hedge knights romanticizing their lifestyle. Something we talked about in the past that you noticed as well here in our notes is that, well, Dunk can't afford a tent, so he's out in the stars. It's part of the basics of it. I mean, it's just a fact. He can't afford to not sleep out under the stars. But he legitimately likes it. It's not one of those things he just tells himself. You don't get the sense that he's just trying to I don't want a tent anyway. I like the stars more. No, he seems to legitimately like it. He likes looking at the night sky, and heck, the night sky is a nice thing, right? Like, it's not a strange thing to imagine. But again, I do think it's important to note that it's not something he's just telling himself in vain to make him feel better. He's not assuaging his poverty with creative reasons, and I think he actually likes it, right?
There's a saying when you're in the field. It's called "embrace the suck," and a lot of that is kind of you commiserate with your fellows, but it doesn't seem to apply here. But whenever I hear about Dunk saying, "Yeah, no, these things are great," a hedge is just as good a pavilion. Sometimes I think that I feel embrace the suck when it's when it's pouring rain and I'm stuck out doing in the field on drill or something like that, and it's just, hey, well, you have to be here, so you might as well like it.
It's sort of in the same family as gallows humor, not quite as bad as as that, but it's in that family. There's making the best out of it.
Plenty of soldiers have great gallows humor.
I suppose they would. Huh? Makes sense. And he likes the constellations. He knows their names. I mean, that's the kind of thing you would get into if you're spending a lot of time looking at the sky. And it's in contrast to Sir Eustace describing the beauty of the sunset. Remember, we talked about that last time about he's the beauty of the sunset despite people moaning and dying, and it's right after the battle. And in that sense, it was more of a sunset, though. There's also kind of an opposite going on here. Sir Eustace was sort of describing the setting of his own sun as well as the Blackfire sun, which those two things were linked. And Dunk's star is on the rise. Dunk is a young man. The best is yet to come for him. And he's living the life he kind of wants to live. So it's nice. Yeah, it's pretty good. These things line up kind of nicely.
Yeah.
We've got a quote here. Shay is going to read us one of Dunk's nice reveries of the clouds and sky.
There were stars in the sky as well, more stars than any man could ever hope to count, even if he lived to be as old as King Jaehaerys. Dunk need only lift his eyes to find familiar friends, the stallion and the sow, the king's crown and the crone's lantern, the galley, the ghost, and moonmaid. But there were clouds to the north, and the blue eye of the ice dragon was lost to him, the blue eye that pointed north.
So this line comes right after he's daydreaming, or dusk dreaming, rather, about finding his own father. So it's part of why he's thinking of the north, because one of the ideas one his father might be is on the wall. But this is pretty strong symbolism, the fact that the ice dragon, the blue eye, is covered. It's lost to him, which I think means that he's not going north just yet. Maybe when the clouds part, then it will be time to go north. So I don't know. What do you think about that? Obviously, he goes north at some point.
But I think it just means that don't look at the horizon. Eyes on what's in front of you, not on the horizon. Dunk is dreaming, but the problem with Standfast is right in front of him. And it's maybe a setting way, the setting as character saying, no, don't go north. You have an adventure here.
You're not done here yet. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and at the end of the story, of course, they think about going in that direction. They're either going to go west or north, and presumably there's going to be something in between that. So that's something we'll talk about more in the wrap-up episode. We'll save that for later. And
tying into the Western theme, usually it ends with the cowboy riding off into the sunset.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's Dunk and Egg riding towards the. Well, I guess the blue dragon is a stand-in for Polaris.
Yeah, it is the North Star, kind of. Yeah, you're right. That's true. And instead of like a cowboy hat, he's got a floppy hat, right? Straw hat.
Big floppy hat.
It's pretty close, yeah. But along these lines, though, there's a lot more potential for Dunk and Egg stories. They may not, whether we get all 12 that George has planned or not seems a separate question, but. Have you imagined scenarios, or have you thought about places you'd like to see Dunk and Egg go, given there's so much room to theorize?
Not just places. Well, I mean, first off, I want them to go to the Westerlands because we don't have a POV in the Westerlands, so we've never actually seen Casterly Rock or Lannisport or anything like that.
True.
We haven't seen them yet, and I want to see them. But I also want Bittersteel to be because they even say in the appendix for the Night of Seven Kingdoms, they say they're even going to go across the Narrow Sea. And it's like, that's a great thing to actually give us Bittersteel because he looms large over the Blackfire rebellions, especially these later Blackfire rebellions. And so I actually want him to get into the story at some point. And I know he is because obviously he's pretty much set up to do so for the third Blackfire Rebellion.
Yes.
But I would really like to see Bittersteel in a non-combat setting, which would only really happen in Essos.
Yeah. There's almost no way Dunk and Egg could like talk to him unless he was in prison, unless it was like right after the third rebellion when he was captured and before he was sent to the wall. That's the only time. So I think you're right. And it would, given that we have been told that they're going to Essos, it does seem sort of a natural idea. You might see parallels to John Connington's chapters with the Golden Company. You might see something funny like Egg being like, we really, really don't want him to know who we are.
I'm also thinking if there is one in Essos, it might be dealing with Tyroshi politics between Kira and Rohan of Tyrosh's family, because
really
Tyrosh is an electorate. Yeah. So the reason you could probably guess that the reason why Kira of Tyrosh got married into Targaryens twice was to provide political counterbalance so that Tyrosh doesn't support Bittersteel and the Blackfires.
Exactly.
So that might be an interesting couple of chapters.
Yep. And then we let us see Tyrosh, which has come up a lot. It's an interesting place.
Yeah.
It's an outpost.
And also,
the fish
when Tyrion listens to how the free folk everyone speaks in council. And he's like, how do you get anything done? Or, we could see the same thing with, in Tyros when they're like, everyone gets a vote. All of these people get votes. And they're like voting? Why would you do that?
Or with all the colored hair, they're going to be like, look at you all with your plain hair. Look at your undyed hair. You need to get your beard dyed. I don't know. There's nothing to dye on Dunk, though.
Let's hope that Dunk. Let's have Dunk get a bad dye job, and he spends the rest of the book regretting it, just like it's a bad tattoo.
That'd be great. I'd like to see them go to the Vale. That would be fun. Maybe Crackclaw Point. Crackclaw Point just to have more Brienne parallels.
Can I say the titles that we have potentially, just real quick, I think will be relevant.
Sure.
That, of course, we were talking about the village hero. We haven't mentioned the She-Wolves of Winterfell. And there's the Sellsword, which we were just talking about, but there's also the Champion, the Kingsguard, and the Lord Commander.
Right.
Which, in terms of us thinking about different genres, I have to wonder, for the She-Wolves, what that would be. I think the Sellsword, exactly, would be like that. The Sellsword seems like that's pretty war-centric there.
Yeah, that could be where we get to the Gold Company or whatever.
But you would imagine one of these coming up would be a horror thriller type thing. There would be something that was pretty horror.
That makes sense. And
that might be Summerhall, though.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Would be,
or that could be a disaster flick.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
I'm thinking the Lord, or not the Lord Commander, the Kingsguard specifically, either the Kingsguard or maybe the Lord Commander will be against Lionel Baratheon.
Yeah, that could be the Champion. That would make sense as well. But
it could also be the Champion. But I mean, as I understand it, at that point he is Lord Commander.
I think you're right, but we'd have to check that.
So, but that could easily be a fun, a more like a high stakes. Not an act. I mean, it could be an action piece.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be. You could see Dunk maybe doing something at Storm's End similar to what Barristan did at Duskendale or something like that.
Yeah.
To kind of earn the audience
Right
between
on.
Lionel, then it culminates in the showdown.
So yeah, we'll go into these a little deeper. We'll go some heavier theorizing on what we think these might mean. I'm glad to get Jim's takes on them because we probably won't have you for the wrap up, but we get your thoughts now, and then we'll add some more thoughts to this when we do our wrap up. So that'll be pretty fun.
Yeah.
Let's move on to something we talked about doing. We gave you guys a brief preview of this ahead. It's called The Lion's Eye View. Now, 6 years ago was the first episode we did together. That was the Redgrass field. That was a lot of fun. We tried to figure out everything we could with the way the battle played out, with what happened. We filled in the blanks when there's nothing to know. We triangulate or make our best guesses and work with what we have. And it's a pretty big battle. I mean, massive battle, really. But what we didn't do was look at it from Eustace's point of view, like a soldier's or a knight's point of view, rather than we looked at it as from the high level view, like from the top down, like a set piece, looking at all the armies at once. What would it be like to be on the inside, facing it all with the dust and mud and blood and everything and the confusion and chaos? Well, we're going to take a stab at that. First of all, a little bit of setup. Also, by the way, for those of you out here, since we talked about this so thoroughly 6 years ago, you might need a little bit of a recap here. 85,000 was our high-end guess on how many soldiers were involved on both sides. Could have been lower. Maybe, I think 70K was our low-end guess, but this is a pretty large amount, one of the largest battles of all time in Westeros.
Yeah, we said it was roughly equivalent to the Ruby Ford.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Because roughly the same number of kingdoms were there.
Yeah, and had a similar sort of ish result in that with the death of one of the leaders. That was sort of it.
Yeah.
So the vet intel, as usual with these medieval style battles, you very often have three main organized groups on both sides: the vanguard, the center, and the reserve. Now, that's not all the armies, of course. There's other people, especially in this battle. There were people just arriving during it constantly because it was a very touch-and-go situation that developed quickly. It wasn't like, all right, 3 weeks from now, we're going to meet in front of King's Landing and have this battle. No, Damond made a move for the capital. The loyalists made a move to stop him, and, well, it was very hurried. So Vanguard led by Damond himself, the center led by Gorman Peak, who's obviously a big part of these stories, and the reserve commanded by Bittersteel. We guessed at the time that Eustace was in the center under Peake. He would have all the Standfast men with him, probably some unnamed household knights. He probably had more men back then, right? His house has fallen farther into decline, and it's been 15 years since the rebellion, so he probably had more dudes then. Certainly his sons were there. And Edwin, Harold, and Adam, those were the three. Edwin's the oldest, and Harold. And Adam, of course, is the one Lady Webber fell for, and she resents Eustace taking him to war. But it wasn't unusual for Adam to be there. I mean, he was 12, which is the same age as Damon's twin sons, Aegon and Aemon, or Edric Dane is 12. Edwin and Harold were already knights. Knighthood as a teenager is not super common. It's not uncommon exactly, but I would guess that Edwin and Harold were probably at least 10 years older than Adam. They were probably in their early 20s, if not a little older. What would you...
Yeah, I mean, I would say at the very least they were at least 16 or 17. Yeah. Probably 17. 17's the low end.
I agree.
Because, I mean, you hear about the people that are like super legendary knights. They get knighted really early in this 13, 14. But these are the Jaime Lannisters and all those type. And nothing we have in the text suggests these are the same level of sword virtuoso.
Yeah, it seems like he would have mentioned that if one of his sons was like ridiculously good. It would have been some story about how he finally died or what finally got him or something like that.
Yeah, no, if there was anybody that was that young, he might have even been taken into Damon's personal retinue.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Because Damon had the same, because Damon was knighted at a very young age.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, the youngest ever, I think, if we're told. He was 12.
Before Jaime.
Yeah, Jaime was 15.
No, it's something different. Yeah, but no, it was Maegor was the youngest, then it was Damon. Yeah, that's right. That's how it went.
And so the battle would have started with the two vanguards coming together. The vanguard, of course, the front. They smash into it, and we have, Shay is going to read us this quote.
Damon was the warrior himself that day. No man could stand before him. He broke Lord Aaron's van to pieces and slew the Knight of Nine Stars and Wild Will Waynwood before coming up against Ser Gawain Corbray of the Kingsguard.
So it's pretty specific. Now, later parts of the description of the battle he gives are not nearly as precise. So what I'm picturing here is that he's in Gorman Peake's army, the center. Now, Gorman has to be able to see what's going on. He has to be able to watch the battle. He needs to see what's happening with the two vanguards, so he needs to know when to make his move. So it makes sense that if Gorman can see the action, Gorman can see Damon fighting, then that's probably Eustace's personal view. He's probably also sitting on his horse just watching all this happen. And of course, given that Damon's the man and that Eustace idolizes, that so many people idolize, of course, that's where your focus is going to be when you're watching this play out. Do you think I have got it about right, Jim?
I think so. And it might be, I mean, Damon's first van charge might have been all cavalry. He might have just had his cavalry going. And so the other units, the left, the center, and the right, would have had infantry as well, so they may have just been marching slower. Okay. But especially if it was in the beginning, there wouldn't be as much dust kicked up by in the battle. I mean, in later parts of the battle, you'll see a lot of sporadic information, and it stands to reason that there's lots of dust and stuff like that going up, as well as just the general chaos of battle. It's a lot harder to see things when there's actually people trying to kill you right next to you.
That makes sense.
So I could see that being the big thing. And then I'm guessing that we saw probably something very immediate when Damon charged in. I wouldn't be surprised if like the first charge, Damon took out one or two guys just right there. They don't necessarily have to be, the Knight of Nine Stars or Wild Will Waynwood, just somebody. And it's just, I mean, when it was like a truck hitting an egg when Damon charges at the very beginning, because I mean we see such dramatic effect, and we hear about now, even if some of this is secondhand, chances are really good that he sees a lot of early momentum very early on with his charge.
Yeah, it looked really good. Yeah, I mean it looks really good, and then it looks even better because Peake orders the advance. So if our earlier assumption was correct that Eustace is in this unit, they are met by the Loyalist Center led by Lord Hayford. Now Lord Hayford was a staunch Loyalist, but this is where we know Gorman Peake was a pretty good fighter, apparently. He kills Lord Hayford personally, and he kills Roger of Pennytree, Sir Arlen's squire. So that's a small little dot connection here that resonates pretty large in the greater story. This is when Eustace would probably have started actual hand-to-hand fighting personally, which he doesn't ever describe his own who he fought, but surely it happened, right?
Yeah, I mean, but it is entirely possible he just fought no-name footmen.
Yeah,
so
that's true. That's true.
He just wouldn't have known.
He's not like what's his name, who just gives names to his that hedge knight that Brienne meets. Is like, you would never the knight of the red chicken, and all. He just gives them. He gives them deeds since they don't have any.
Yeah.
Eustace isn't embellished quite as much, unless it's Damon. Eustace will embellish for Damon, but not for himself.
Well, given a good Damon is, I don't need to embellish too much.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. You don't need to exaggerate when you're that good, right? So it looked really good at this point for them. You have the Vanguard, the Black Vanguard is winning, and the Black Center appears to be winning. And the Loyalist Center apparently is collapsing and or disarray.
Yeah.
Decent chance all of Osgrey's sons are still alive at this point. Maybe one of them has already fallen. It's we're just guessing. But given how well things are going, there's a decent chance it's just going perfectly well in that sense. And then it starts to turn. Maekar does a great job of revitalizing the defense, holds them. And of course, we're also told that Daemon's chivalry is a big problem here. It's not a mistake. It is a mistake, but he doesn't call it a mistake. It's like he was too chivalrous. Even when he's wrong, it's because he was good, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that you see a lot with like the Lost Cause myth and stuff like that. It's where they say it was a doomed struggle and things like that. But I mean, in fairness, I mean, given how much that Damon adhered to the strictures of chivalry, that was part of his brand. So he would have needed to do perform chivalrous acts in order to maintain his image and his leadership.
Yeah.
So it was a decision, and he couldn't have known that it would have been good or bad at that point. So.
Yeah.
So I mean, I could say it was. I mean, you could say it was a mistake after the fact, but you can't say that he was making a mistake there. It was not the right judgment call.
Yeah.
And perhaps you could have said that he should have instead charged to try and either split the center and then roll up the line and pressure Maekar, or just gone and pressure Maekar himself. But it is. I mean, we don't actually see a play-by-play of the battle, so we don't even. I mean, it's entirely possible that it's like, oh, if only if he just run over Gwaine Corbray, we would have won. Maybe that's not actually true.
Yeah,
but maybe it is.
It would have been different, but it doesn't need. We
don't have a play-by-play, so we can't really analyze it the way we can with actual battles that like historian, like the Battle of Midway or something,
right? Where we have much
dissected
better details.
To death.
Yeah. We're much more sure about what happened. And so let's see if we can follow this action from here. You tell me if you agree with my estimation here. What I think happens next is Damon is shot down. His banners collapse. Somehow people learn
that's important. Specifically, we need to say that his banner must have fallen over.
Yeah.
We talked about this in the Barristan episode.
Yes.
The banners are very important.
Point,
they're signal devices as much as they are, embodiments of who you are. So specifically, if you see let's just even say that probably someone picks up the banner when it falls the first time and then it falls again.
Yeah. And the arrows keep flying. Bloodraven want to keep that down.
That's going to be probably the big image. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going to cause panic as the warrior himself, the man who he was unbeatable, is beaten.
That's such a hard, because you got to figure that a lot of these guys just had this idea, this instinct, this feeling that they couldn't lose. And it was the action to that point was proving that belief correct because they were winning. They were doing so well. And then it just stopped and everything turned the other way. And that's where a lot of the chaos begins. And this is why Eustace's description from this point on is even more chaotic. He says, I saw some of it myself. So my guess is what happens is the banners fall. Bittersteel charges to recover the sword. Or at least to help. Maybe he may not just be recovering the sword. He's just charging to help.
He might have even tried to save Damon.
Yeah.
He might have thought that Damon was still alive.
He doesn't know what's happening. He just knows the banners have fallen. And when he gets there, he's like, oh, damn, they're dead. I better get the sword. Like, that's the only thing left to recover here. Because we know that apparently when Bittersteel duels Bloodraven, he's got Blackfire in hand at that point.
Yeah. It's Blackfire versus Dark Sister.
Yeah, which sounds pretty epic. So since Bittersteel's the reserve charges towards where the Vanguard's position is. That means the center is now where Eustace is now the effective rear, because there is no reserve anymore. And that goes really badly because Prince Baelor emerges from the south and smashes into the rear, which is now the center, since Bittersteel's reserve is now moved away. So they probably weren't prepared for this.
Yeah, it's the hammer and anvil. So what they do is they end up using the momentum of the cavalry to push them against Maekar, who at this point probably he's had his own. He's probably had to rally the center, and probably had riders go out and try and recover as many people from the shattered van as possible to kind of bring them back into the thing. But I would imagine that it was just that's the thing, is that then it sandwiches them together. And since Osgray is in the center, what he ends up happening to him is that he ends up being pushed and surrounded, and then eventually the white flag is thrown.
Yeah,
his sons. I think that's probably, given how much he focuses on the hammer blow and the what if about that. I think that's where his sons die.
I totally agree. I think that's very accurate. It's my best guess. Obviously, we don't know for sure, but so you're basically saying they were pretty much became the meat in the sandwich, or the sword between the hammer and the anvil, the item getting beaten on. And one of the reasons this is so devastating for an army is, imagine that you're at some event out in the street and it gets really crowded, and if you've ever been in like a push of a crowd, like a surge, where your arms are pushed against each other, you can't really move very well. That's what's happening here when the hammer and anvil collide. You got soldiers that can't even lift their weapons or extend their arms to defend themselves or to do much at all. So you can see why that would be horrible for an army to.
And if you lose your footing, you get trampled.
Yeah.
So it's just all you can focus on really is trying to stay upright, because if you fall, your head's going to get smashed in, even purely by accident.
Yeah. As unrealistic as it may have been, the episode of the TV show where they're surrounded and there's big piles of bodies kind of gives you the idea when Jon is like, can't breathe because there's so many people pressed around him. Forget the details. That kind of captures the essence of it.
Oh, that's the Battle of Cannae.
Yeah, right. Where the Romans were surrounded by the Carthaginians, even though the Carthaginians had fewer men. It was pretty expertly done. But that is so that gives you an idea of just how awful it was. And this is what Eustace is probably at this point. He tells us that he saw Adam standing over Harold's body. Edwin's the oldest. I would guess that Edwin's already dead at this point, or somewhere else, because if Harold's lying there on the ground and the squire's guarding him, the older brother, you would think, would have also done that if he had been around.
Given that Edwin was probably a fully fledged adult, he may have been in his own battle.
That's true.
If he wasn't dead already.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. So, but we also know what type of it was a knight of House Smallwood that killed Adam. Those were rivermen, not Dornishmen or Stormlanders, who were the ones who smashed into the rear. So my guess is maybe when they got smashed into from behind, they were near the front. So they were perhaps
they were killed by someone in Maekar's unit.
Yeah, so they were pressed up against the anvil rather than hit by the hammer. If we can make our metaphor work that way. And what do you think? Was he captured, or did he run away? What do you think? It's kind of hard to tell.
Given that if he was actually in between the hammer and the anvil, he probably was captured.
Yeah, might be hard to run away from that.
Because if he ran away, he would have probably tried to make it to Bittersteel and then follow him into exile, and none of that happened. So my guess is that he was, he was captured.
Yeah, totally agree with that, because he regrets not going into exile with Bittersteel.
Yeah.
But he wasn't necessarily.
And that suggests that he just didn't have the possibility of even doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting, too, we say Bittersteel turned the route after recovering Blackfire. It's also possible Eustace was part of that. He was running, and then Bittersteel helped turn him around. But if he was trapped in the center, probably not.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he was always in the center, and so he was always with Gorman Peak.
I agree. That's more likely, but I wanted to throw that possibility out there.
Yep.
And so one of the things much later, back to the actual story, Sir Eustace still pours out libations for his boys whenever he opens a new cask and says, "To the king." This is told to us at the start of the story. It doesn't say which king, though. So it's part of the sneakiness, the slow reveal of what's happening there. A little more about the dedication to chivalry. Here's a great take from Nina. In Eustace's mind, it was Damon's dedication to chivalry which was his undoing. That if only Damond had ridden over Gawain Corbray and left him to his fate, he might have broken Maekar's left before Bloodraven could take the ridge. The Redgrass field became sort of a morality play for sure. Eustace, that's a great way to put it. Like, the good guy was too good, and the bad guys were too evil. The whole shooting him from a ridge, this dishonorable method of killing someone in battle and all that, and kin slaying and all that. Yeah, it is very much cast in that light of good versus evil. It wasn't just we're the more just cause, which he believed that for sure. But this is he frames it as good versus evil, which I don't agree with that. I don't even agree that necessarily that it was a just cause, but you can maybe make that case. But good versus evil? No, I don't think so. That's ridiculous. No. But he did kind of, over the years, it's kind of set in his mind that way.
Well, I mean, the same thing with in World War I, which a lot of people don't really hold up as a good and evil cause. There was talk from like British soldiers that captured German soldiers and vice versa. It's like, how can you possibly be thinking that you're fighting for good? We're fighting for good.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was exactly that way. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of those rationalizations work, but I mean, it's a good thing. You know, he's turning it into a storybook, and turning it into the storybook also kind of lessens the hurt in a way.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, it's one thing if you fought so nobly and so honorably for a cause that was so noble that it was doomed to fail.
Too good to live, yeah.
Yeah, too good for this sinful earth.
And there's these little details that are mixed in, like the phrase "a white arrow and a black spell," or the 7 arrows piercing him, which is meant to make us think
the perversion of the faith's holy number.
Yeah, exactly.
So, by an old god's worshiper.
Yep.
Yep.
So there's mixed in with all these what ifs, right? We've discussed some of them already, and he has this line here that's where most of the what ifs are encapsulated sort of at once. So let's discuss that for a minute here. Here's the quote.
Sir Eustace cradled his wine cup in both hands. If Damon had ridden over Gawain Corbray, if Fireball had not been slain on the eve of battle, if Hightower and Tarbuck and Oakhart and Butterwell had lent us their full strength instead of keeping to 1 foot in each camp, if Manfred Lothston had proved true instead of treacherous, if storms had not delayed Lord Bracken's sailing with the Mirish crossbowmen, if Quickfinger had not been caught with the stolen dragon's eggs. So many ifs, sir. Had any one come out differently, it could have all turned the other way. Then we would be called the loyalists, and the red dragons would be remembered as men who fought to keep the usurper Daron the false-born upon his stolen throne, and failed.
So there's a lot of bitterness in there, of course. It's an emotional outpouring as much as it is a real breakdown of events. I mean, a lot of these are close calls, for sure. But what about the close calls on the other side, right? I mean, there had to be close calls that went their way as well as ones that didn't. I mean,
like what if they were able? What if Craig Hall was able to actually defend the pass into the reach? What if it's like what if
Damon had been arrested, right? Like what if he hadn't gotten out of the Red Keep? The whole war doesn't even happen. I mean,
what if Donald Aaron hadn't slipped on a ketchup packet and then actually had it break, and then all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, the thing is, chances. I mean, now the side that wins isn't necessarily going to look at the what if so much as the side that loses.
That's true.
But if it had gone the other way, how many former Reds would have been saying that same exact speech to Duncan's 7th child, who ends up being walking around with a secret hedge knight? I mean.
Yeah. There's the line about the Mirish crossbowmen, but we talk about how Baelor's army got there just in time. Like, there were lots of people that just barely got there or that didn't get there. It's very selective which ones he's mentioning that didn't quite get there. And this is also a thing. Like, maybe now with Lord Bracken and the Mirish crossbowmen, with hired help, you got to figure he really was trying to get there on time, especially given the Brackens were pretty.
You have to pay for them,
right? Yeah, exactly. But when you get into cases like the late Lord Frey or Tywin waiting to see who wins the Red Fork before pouncing on King's Landing, we do have an example of that. Leo Longthorn, the Tyrell Lord, did that here. He waited to see who won, or he said he didn't say that, but he did. That's pretty much what he did. And there's probably a big part of what was happening in the battle here is thinking about houses who fought for both sides. Like that's mentioned here, Oakhart, Butterwell, Hightower, and Tarbeck. They fought for both sides. There's a lot of examples of that in the real world where you have a set-piece battle happening between two major factions, and there's a third faction that's just kind of standing there waiting to see who starts winning before they take one side or the other. So they're literally sitting there with their army waiting to decide who to join. So that really puts the pressure on the early stage of the battle, doesn't it? Like if one side starts losing, that might be it, because the third party might join on the side of the winners, because they're certainly not waiting to see who's losing to help the loser, right? Like that's not happening.
And it happens it happens in wars too. I mean, I think of the China entering the Korean War after the North Korean. I mean, because that is one thing where they helped the losing side, because by that time North Korea was being pushed all the way to the Yalu River. But I mean, there was ideological elements towards the Korean War. The Chinese would have never entered on the sides of the Americans.
Right.
But it's just, I mean, the perfidious Lord Stanley, who charges Richard in the back at Bosworth Field.
Yep, that's one of the ones I was thinking of for sure. Bosworth is a big example of that.
But it shows how important that this momentum is. It's like you can see how Damon just starts like a snowball, and it's really only, I mean, say it's a lucky arrow and Bloodraven fires all of his shots and doesn't get anybody. Well, then what happens? It's like, oh, well, then somebody just charges up and kills Bloodraven. But that momentum would have kept going. So momentum is big, but especially in feudal armies where there's these keystone armies where it really is the Lord, and such a big morale hit when the Lord falls. That's when it falls, and then it snowballs in the other direction.
Yeah, because
Damon dies, and then oh boy, everything goes south. So, and in an era where a lot of the soldiery is not necessarily professional, well, I mean, you're going to get that.
Yeah, and they know too. Like you said, it works both ways. Like the loyalists, when they see Damon's banners dip, they're like, "Oh my God, we were losing. We were getting crushed.
we actually have this."
Yeah, like what a surge of going from like intense fear to wow, we have a chance, or to wow, actually we're going to win, or maybe even wow, we've won. If Damon's dead, that's it. Some people may have gotten like maximum confidence from that. So, yeah. And the houses that stand on the side too. It's important to note that a lot of them. It's some of the most powerful ones because they have the most to lose by being on the wrong side of the eventual winner. Like the houses, there's the smaller, scrappy houses that aren't at the center of realm politics. Their largesse doesn't depend on their political positioning as much. They don't want anything to change that. But the ones who are lower down the ladder, who want to move up, it's an opportunity to move up by taking the right side. The gambling makes more sense.
Yeah, that's why you didn't see any of the Lords Paramount actually join Damon's side overtly. The closest one you had was Leo Longthorn.
Yeah.
And given that the Reach was the capital of Blackfire support, it's understandable why he would at least have to try and do something.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's no way to go. There's no way up for the Lannisters or the Aarons or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they're going to defend the status quo because they're on the top, and well, they're number 2 on the status quo, as opposed to the only the royalty is a step higher.
Yeah.
Whereas all these number 2 houses, the Ironwoods, for example, or all of these families that have a better blood claim to the Reach than House Tyrell and stuff like that.
Chance to move up one spot, yeah, exactly, to be number 1,
to be the new guy in charge of that region.
Yep, to be the new High Lord, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So one of the what ifs that I really wonder about, that I want to get your take on, since it's very military in its understanding, is let's say he wins. Let's say the Damon gets through, the armies gets the way to King's Landing is clear. Eustace is like, oh, we would have just rolled into King's Landing. Well, I don't know about that. I mean, King's Landing is it's pretty hard to take. The Red Keep is extremely hard to take. And the city itself, it's not that easy. Maybe loyalists would have let them in. That's entirely possible. You only need one gate to let in. That's one thing.
And let's be honest. I mean, the Gold Cloaks sold out King's Landing pretty easily in Dance of the Dragons.
Absolutely.
And if everybody thinks it's the losing side, they're going to try and bail out and save their own neck.
Definitely.
That happened a lot actually in sieges. A lot of times, a tower would have been bribed, and they let men over in the night, and they'd open the gatehouse and let them in.
It only takes one.
So
only one.
That's what because I mean, we don't know if the Blacks even had a navy. So you can't lay siege to King's Landing without a navy because it's a port.
Yeah. They may have had the Red Wine Fleet. We don't know for sure.
But unless they had the Red Wines of the Tyroshi, then they're not going to be able to actually starve King's Landing into submission.
Yeah.
What they're going to need to do is to find a way to just essentially bribe, get their way in, and then I mean, once you get to Maegor's Holdfast and you're actually trying to siege the Red Keep, you could actually do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, and it also depends on, I mean, what happens if, let's say, like the best possible scenario happens for the Blacks, and not only do they win at Redgrass Field, but they kill Bittersteel. They either kill or capture Baelor and Maekar, and all of that. I mean, they could try and capture Bloodraven, but he's going to end up with a sudden case of dead if Bittersteel is anywhere near him. But I could understand Damon making sure that Baelor and Maekar, if they were taken alive, would not be harmed. But I mean, who's going to lead the armies if Donal Arryn, Lord Hayford, Baelor, Maekar, Bloodraven, all those guys are gone?
Yeah, right.
Who do you have left? I mean, Gwaine Corbray's gone. I mean, how many other Kingsguard? I mean, chances are really good. At least the one other Kingsguard member was actually guarding Maekar. So you would have lost some of the members of the Kingsguard. Who's actually left? And what do you have? You have the Castle Household Guard. At that point, I mean, he might have just had to flee to, Daron might have had to flee to, Essos, which is the destination, the destination vacation for any Targaryen exiles.
Yeah, maybe he just goes to Dragonstone, or maybe he has to go all the way to Essos. Yeah,
I mean, he might go to Dragonstone if he doesn't have if the Blacks don't have a navy, then they have to go and build one. So they could flee to Dragonstone while he thinks of his next move. But he might have to flee.
Yeah.
I mean,
and in the meantime, Damon sits the Iron Throne and starts ruling. And he doesn't even have to. Yeah. Daron sitting on Dragonstone, it's a loose end, but once the throne's captured. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, you just have to purpose build a navy to actually take him out.
Yeah, it would have taken a lot longer, basically.
Unless the Valarians stay loyal because he's on Dragonstone.
That's true. Then there's all sorts. This is the problem. This is
so many ways.
Show, how many what ifs there are.
They could consolidate afterwards and win if they win commandingly at Redgrass Field. But I think that's not because it's like, oh, we'll just steamroll into King's Landing. No, what's going to happen is a bunch of Red Loyalists are going to jump ship.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to enable the rest of the victory. But that's normal.
That is normal.
I mean,
right.
Yeah. I mean, think about what happened when they went down to Storm's End and the Reach said, oh, yeah, no, you won. You won.
Sorry, you got it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So he's got some points, but there's a lot of assumptions he's making, and this is a problem with what ifs. Like, there's just, you can't be sure. You can't take them too far. They're fun, but they're not something you can put a lot of stock in.
I love what ifs, but they're.
And it's true to think, let's take this phrase, history is written by the winners. That phrase has a lot of truth to it, but it can go too far, and I think this is an example of that. For example, when he says that they would be looking at Daron as the usurper who fought, the false-born usurper or whatever. I'm not so sure about that. I think that, Aemon the Dragon Knight, one of the most famous knights who ever lived, won a trial by combat proving that Daron was trueborn. I don't think the history is going to omit that. Damon's not going to go in there and tell them to erase that from the history books. No. That's the thing. History can be written by the winners, and if they lie... Maybe
they'll do a legalistic argument where they specifically say, well, no, it was actually phrased wrong.
Yes, right? So...
I would love that. A quibble over a conjunction piece of punctuation.
It's like there should have been a comma there. Yeah, it's like, no, money down.
Lionel Hutzing it.
Yep, Lionel Hutzing it. Those commas do a lot of work. So, and that's another thing about the historical record and history being written by the winners. It doesn't erase the history that came before it, right? Egregious historical distortions often get corrected by future generations. So even if like Daemon's generation tried to act like he was trueborn and all these other things, like there's too many facts out there, too many people that know the truth, too many things already written down. So I think Eustace is going a little too far with that argument. Not that Daemon ruling and winning wouldn't have made Westeros significantly different, but maybe not. Maybe his dynasty lasts one generation and it gets wiped out. After all, the spring sickness probably still happens. Like we're not right. So like they could have just all been wiped out.
Daemon being on the throne is not going to stop microbes.
Yeah, right.
It just is. But I mean, it's like, a lot of things could change, and it's entirely possible that then there's reaction against the changes that are being enacted. So you can't say, I mean, you could have a lot of fun and you could play CK2 Game of Thrones mod and win as Daemon and see what you do. I know I've certainly done that.
Same.
But it's you can't, when you say what if, it's like whenever you're playing with what ifs, it's always, what if it didn't go that way? Yeah. And it's like, well, okay, that's no more valid than the what if in general.
I think we know what Eustace Osgray's favorite Marvel show is.
What's that?
The new What If show.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what we need ourselves.
That's true, we do. One of these, the last bit I want to say about his what ifs is this bit about the stolen dragon's eggs. We wonder what they were doing there. Like, was it about money to be able to sell them? Probably not, because it doesn't seem like they were hurting for cash.
No. I mean, they were able to mint their own cash.
Yeah,
their
right.
coinage.
They seem to have plenty of money. Like Nina's suggestion is that it was another, like along the lines of the sword, like a symbol of legitimacy, like tying them to the Targaryens.
Could be used as that. I mean, with the loss of with the loss of Aegon's crown in Dorne, Blackfire is the only symbol of Aegon the Conqueror, but everybody knows the dragons are extinct, but dragon eggs still are there.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Stephen Atwell, when we were talking about it in the Battle of Redgrass Field episode so many years back, said that, what if the dreams are actually for real and there's an actual hatchling that comes out of there, which we talked about that, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and it's like, well, I mean, I think even you said, it's like, well, if he actually hatches a dragon, Daeron II is probably like, fair cop. You know what? Yeah, I really can't argue with that. But I mean, Bloodraven would. Bloodraven would absolutely strangle a dragon hatchling.
Yeah.
But I mean, just because I'm more of a mundane guy, I go with what Nina is saying about about it being a strong symbol of legitimacy, and to present and project himself as the Targaryen. I mean, he's very clearly assuming the Aegon hero myth.
Yes.
And not, I mean, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I mean, he lives in an illiterate society. It's a good idea to do it. But I think that's what he's trying to do, is trying to gain legitimacy. Or, I mean, hey, maybe somebody did it. Maybe Quickfinger did it to get in good with Aegon.
Maybe.
Right.
It's
probably possible.
He was like,
Damon might have been like, don't steal dragon eggs. What's wrong with you? We're chivalrous here.
That's a what if I wonder about, is whether or not, if Damon had won, whether bastardy would have been viewed differently. When they start to trickle down a little bit.
But on the same hand, I mean, Ronard Storm was a Storm King who was a bastard, and a pretty effective one, and they still have bastard prejudice.
That's true. Yeah, it wouldn't have gone away entirely. I mean, that's for sure.
it's hard to erase prejudice, especially in one generation.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That's really more of a that's a thing, an effort, a generations long effort.
Very
it just
much
is.
so. Yeah. Let's take a few questions here. Nina says, closing out the Sworn Sword with the best guest. Right on.
See, every single time when I get told that I'm the best guest, I'm like, well, then the only way I can go is down.
The problem.
My chair will fall apart right here, and it's going to turn into a blooper reel or something.
Austin Flowers, good take here. Isn't Dunk a Hercules metaphor? 12 stories planned like Hercules had 12 trials. He's also big and unsure of his lineage. Hey, that's pretty good. I never thought of that.
I didn't even think about that. No, that's a good one.
That's a good one, Austin Flowers. I like that. Yeah. I'm not sure I have anything to add to it other than acknowledging that it's a very good.
No, it's a good.
Think on it, I suppose, before next week and think about what the 12 trials are.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to. Yeah, I'll do some more research on that. That's a good point. Yeah. Great, good rabbit hole to get us started on there, Austin Flowers.
Well, let's see which one is cleaning the stables.
Nina says, Jim's point about the stories being individual adaptations strengthens my thought of the village hero being a sort of Seven Samurai. Oh, yeah, definitely, because
possible.
That is, for folks who don't know, if we haven't explained this very well, the village hero is one of the planned titles. It's probably the next one. It's probably number 4. A lot of theories about that one. We'll get into the details of what some of the theories are around it, but given the scenarios where the Seven Samurai takes place, which is in a village setting, that does fit extremely well.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be Pennytree or something like that.
Yes,
it could be
Pennytree.
And if it's in Pennytree, this might also be, because Shea was talking about a romantic comedy for Dunk and Egg. This might be the start of Black Betha and Eggs Meet Cute.
Yes.
Yeah, I had 2 thoughts here, actually. One, currently the village hero is the 5th novel. She-Wolves is the 4th.
No, it's the other way around.
Okay, the wiki does not have that.
I think the wiki is wrong.
Okay,
yeah.
Anyways,
but it's not a big deal either way.
Yeah, well, if the village hero is the next one, then Egg is still very young to have a romantic comedy happen.
Yeah, no, okay, that's
there's
fair.
that.
That's true. That's true.
But in terms of a romance, I was bringing up, Dale of Targaryen and the Tarth.
Okay.
That would be a good straight romance type thing.
Okay, sure.
So.
That makes sense.
Makes sense.
Guilty Undertaker says, is Walder a fancied up version of Wat, or is Wat short for Walder? No, I don't think so. I think Wat's just a separate name.
Just a name.
I don't know that it's short for anything.
Wat is apparently short for Walter generally.
Oh, is it?
That is a thing. And so I think in world we can say that I think we should make that comparison.
Okay.
Between Walt and Walders. Walders are all over the place, yeah.
Well, I guess the problem is if you do the same nomenclature for Walder, your name would be Wad.
Yeah.
So maybe Wat is just a concession to it just not being too ridiculous.
Wad. Yeah, I don't want anyone calling me Wad. Stefan B wants to know about the naming convention. He notices the difference, the Wendell Wyman being so similar to the Manderleys. That's a pretty straightforward answer. The Manderleys are from this area originally. In fact, one of the 3 castles held by House Peak used to belong to House Manderley. And, of course, the Peaks are also nearby here. So,
I mean, they still call themselves the champions of the Order of the Green Hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though, even they're reaching in the north.
Yeah, true that. Dornish Dame says, we also see a lot of this, the things like Baseborn versus Bastard, and A Dance with Dragons, with Selyse looking down on the free folk and their cultural traditions. Only Garrett Kingsblood and his kids and Val are given any sort of status because, quote-unquote, they're royal, even though this is completely her projecting her cultural views onto a different culture. Well, that's why it works out that way for her, because of those judgments.
Yeah, these class strictures are very important. I mean, who was it? The orphan of the green blood that was in Ariane's little party, and Dorian's like, ugh, they gossip like fishwives and stuff like that. This cultural posturing is just all over the place.
Yeah, it really is. The Sworn Shield. Oh, that's a good idea. Nina suggests the Sworn Shield.
I mean, why not? I mean, we need more Brienne parallels.
Oh, yeah, for the Dale is one, yes.
Yeah, that works. Yeah, that's a good one to tie
also,
what you're saying about
we were
Dale.
wondering about names for when he goes up to Winterfell, because it wouldn't be the She-Wolves of Winterfell. That doesn't really fit in with the naming convention.
Nickname,
So we're like, what would it be? And my guess, and this is not very serious, is the Conciliator.
The Conciliator. Nice.
He has to deal with all those different factions. I do think he's going to be in a mediating position there.
Could you imagine a grandiose thing like the Peacemaker?
Yeah.
But it turns out he's just settling petty high school drama.
Yeah, something like that. I do think that's like what his role is going to be, though, at Winterfell.
Yeah, he might be. Austin Flowers says, She-Wolves of Winterfell sounds like a 1940s Abbott and Costello horror movie. Yeah, I guess it could, yeah.
I had this picture, and Aziz will be able to picture it too, which is King of the Hill.
Yeah.
There's an episode where Bill Dauterive goes back to his family home in Louisiana, and there's 3 beautiful women there who have all lost their husbands, and they want to continue the family, though. Well, they all start hitting on Bill and coming to him in the night. And getting in bed with him and just really coming on to him very hard. And so I basically picture that. You're in like this big spooky house and women, you're coming into your room.
Just straight up Brides of Dracula style.
Makes a little more sense with Dunk as the sire than Bill Dauterive.
Well, he is a himbo.
Yeah, he's a himbo.
Dunk is such a himbo.
He is. Great comment from Rolling Knight here. just in terms of framing Bloodraven, the prejudice against Bloodraven, given that he was Master of Whisperers, that's another thing that works against him in terms of being trusted. Rolling Knight points out that there isn't a single Master of Whisperers in the history of Westeros that is someone that we consider trustworthy, that was viewed as a trustworthy person. And that's a good point. I can't think of one. I don't think there is one. They're all, just by the nature of that job, seen as, deceivers and people who work with deceivers, and thus, dishonorable job, even though it's usually given to someone of rank.
Yeah. But it's also given to like torturers like Tiana of the Tower. So
yeah, exactly.
That's another reason. There's a lot of occupational baggage with that position.
Absolutely,
that would instill distrust.
Another good point from Rolling Knight. Davos. We talked about how Eustace may have cared more. He may lament the loss of Damond more than he laments the loss of his own sons. And Rolling Knight wants us to frame that with Stannis and Davos. So Stannis didn't die, but. And Davos may become disappointed in Stannis before he dies, but he may not. And if he doesn't, it might be kind of similar. It might be one of these things where Davos laments the loss of Stannis more than he laments the loss of his sons. Probably not. I think Davos is
Davos is too good
at that, but
he's just such a good dad.
He is
such a good dad.
Devon Devon.
I think.
Is still out there.
Given that, yes. Eustace clearly mourns Damon a lot, but I think that's more of a romantic, wistful sense, because even though he's, to the king and stuff like that, he's still pouring out libations and he's still going to the blackberry patch.
Yeah.
So I think that it's just that in terms of, social gender conventions and stuff like that, men don't cry and stuff like that.
Right.
You can kind of lament and it's like, the lost, and you're reliving your glory days. Whereas, I think it's clear that Eustace, for all his many faults, actually did love his kids, and he really does miss them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, certainly. So here's something that I thought would be fun to discuss with you, because you have a strong background in education and languages, and right.
I'm not so sure how strong that education is. At best I'm bilingual, but
still, you have a certain understanding of languages in a way that I think would be helpful here. Let's see. We have a quote here about when Dunk is recognized by his accent.
Dunk furrowed his brow.
How did you know I was from King's Landing, Septon?
King's Landers have a certain way of speaking.
Now, we've seen this before. Actually, technically, we see this later in A Dance with Dragons. It's just that we've seen it before because we reviewed A Dance with Dragons more recently. And it's Tyrion talking with the sellsword Kem in the Second Sons, and it goes like this.
The lad gave him a wary squint.
Who told you I was from King's Landing?
No one. Every word out of your mouth reeks of flea bottom. Your wits gave you away. There's no one clever as a Kingslander, they say.
I'm interested in this just as how these things form. It makes sense that the different regions have different accents, and I'm just curious how these things develop. It makes sense that, even if you speak the same language, different things happen, different people speak different ways. Is there anything you can add to this discussion that would help clear some of the fog away?
So I'm very happy that you asked this question, so I actually don't look like a blithering idiot when it comes to languages. This
Teamwork.
Sounds like actually like King's Landing has a sort of a trade pigeon that they would that is just kind of bled over into their everyday speaking, and that makes a lot of sense. Trade pigeons are essentially a mishmash of different languages that happen around areas of trade where there's a lot of different languages being spoken and words get assumed and kind of borrowed. You saw this especially in medieval eras in places like London, Constantinople, Baghdad. All of these major cities that were huge trade hubs would just have all of these different people talking, and then these languages would keep getting picked up.
Interesting.
Like, I mean, for example, I know because I've studied the Knights Hospitaller. The Knights Hospitaller, when they left when they were kicked out of the Holy Land, they settled in Rhodes, and over the time they spoke kind of a mishmash of Greek and Latin. And then you would see something similar. Like I said, in Baghdad, you would have Arabic as well as Farsi. Well, you wouldn't have Persian. I mean, you have some Persian dialect, and then you would have Mongol diplomats when they come in. Similarly, in China, you would have different kingdoms with their accents coming in, and then when the Mongols or the I can't remember the name of that other horseman group that took over for a while.
The Tatars or the Uzbeks or the
not the Tatars, that they're further west.
Starts with the C maybe. The
Jurchen.
Oh, the Jurchen.
No,
okay.
the Jurchen. They had those languages come in, and you see that all over the place. I mean, you can see it in Indian cities, African cities, North American cities. There's just that language just keeps evolving, and you see, hey, that's a really awesome word for this, and we don't really have a word for this, so we're going to use that word.
Borrow the word.
So my guess is that all of these Kingslanders have a certain they speak words of a trade pigeon that and it makes sense. They say you're too clever by half, and it's just because you have all of these different words for things.
That's cool. That's a great explanation. I like that a lot. It's certainly I had no explanation at all other than acknowledging it makes sense that these regions would develop with different ways of speaking, mannerisms, accents, things like that. So I'm glad to see George injecting a little of that into his world.
Yeah, and I'm glad you actually asked me a question about world building language rather than language itself. Then I would have been kind of much more of an idiot.
Well, it worked out.
A
couple more notes here before we get to our next main topic. Well, there's this great line, though, 3 silvers are better than 3 chickens, I grant you. And just another reminder of what things are worth in this realm. And also it made us think of that Homer Simpson line, didn't it? We love our...
Three silvers can buy many chickens.
Explain how.
Money can be exchanged for goods and services.
Ah, yes. Yep, we always got to get a Simpsons reference or two in there when we can. It's always worth it. A note on the Silent Sisters during the sickness. Well, that's hard to say fast. Sir Eustace says his daughter wouldn't speak to him. Now, it's unclear whether she wouldn't speak to him because she had already taken the vows, or maybe she hadn't taken the vows yet, and she just didn't want to talk to him because she was mad at him. It's not really clear which, but either way, she died during the sickness, as most of the Silent Sisters did, which probably also happened to Fireball's wife. Fireball made his wife join the Silent Sisters because he thought he was getting a Kingsguard cloak. She may have died before the sickness, but...
Well, was it 9/10 of them died in King's
some
Landing?
huge number, yeah. He said nearly all or almost all. I don't think it was, it wasn't specified, but really terrible.
Well, I mean, they handle the dead, so that would
makes
be
sense,
just...
Yikes.
They handle the dead, and they don't have a knowledge of germ theory.
Right,
so...
they have no idea whatsoever. It's a good thing that Sept and Barth made them change out their water situation before.
Yeah, I mean, the sewers helped. Yeah, the sewers helped.
So there's another shout out for Barth there.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little mid-roll shout outs. We took us a while to get to our mid-roll. I guess this will be a little longer episode, but that's okay. We're used to that around here, and that's a good thing. We try to do quantity and quality around here. So, folks, if you're checking out our website, it's a great place to go to find different ways to support us. You can, of course, check out Patreon. You can buy shirts. We've got a lot of designs now, hoodies, T-shirts, stickers, things like that. All those links are on our website, as well as links to buy things through different vendors and merchants that give us a small cut. Patreon, of course, remains one of the best ways, but you can pick and choose whichever method you prefer, whatever suits your situation. I want to shout out our one of our friends over there at Shire Post Mint, great sponsor of ours. They make wonderful coins, and I want to make sure you guys give them a look. Yeah.
They have a really awesome Trader's Dragon.
Do they? Nice. That actually don't remember that one. That's cool. They
actually gave it to me for free.
You don't have that one in your collection?
Which one?
The Blackfire?
Oh, the Trader. Yeah, I'm sorry. I misunderstood what you said. I heard Trader, not Traitor.
Traitor.
Yeah, I do have one of those. Yes, the Damond Blackfire coin.
It's a really good coin.
It is. It's great. It's exactly fitting for this.
It sounded like you were a Blackfire supporter.
Yeah.
Like, I heard you wrong. Trader's coin? Traitor.
Oh, very.
I don't acknowledge calling Damond Blackfire a traitor.
Which is weird because if I remember correctly from my stuff, I'm a bit more of a Blackfire supporter than you are.
Yeah, I was more on the Reds, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So another fun thing we planned for today, since nostalgia is such a major topic and theme of today, and of the Sworn Sword in general. Here's I wrote full list, but it's actually not a full list. A nearly full list of prior appearances by Jim on this show, plus panels we've done together at cons, which that's why it's not complete, because I couldn't find a full record of our panel history at Ice and Fire Con. I got a few of them. I did get a full record of our panels at Con of Thrones, which includes Death of the Other, Hail the Conquering Hero, Targaryen Politics and Post-Dragon Westeros. That also had Sam Wallace, shout out Sam, and Steve Love, shout out Steve. That was 2018. And then we did Blackfire 5 Generations of Strife, which, hey, we're doing some of that again here.
I will say that the Targaryen Politics and a Post-Dragon Westeros, I had a feeling, like I was convinced that was going to be like a barely attended panel just because of how esoteric it was. And also it was on the first day. But we had standing room only on that panel.
That was a good one.
That one was packed, and we had a double room.
We did. Yeah, it was fun. That was really good. We've had some
I was impressed. I was impressed by that panel.
That was really good, yeah. One panel I do recall from Ice and Fire Con was Regional Militia. That was one, that was kind of your baby. And then we had Lady Gwen. And then we did an episode on it with Steve and Alan participating.
We recorded it so that we could actually have that. I'll grab the link for that.
Yeah.
And I know we did Death of the Other down that way too.
Yeah. We did it for both, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, because that one was just so relevant.
Yeah, and the point of Death of the Other was to how humanity will fight the others, like what weapons and tactics and strategies, because it's not like fighting a human foe. So we made some guesses there. Obviously, we don't know for sure, but and several of these panels are available on our YouTube channel / on our podcast feed. We recorded them and put them up. There's no video feed, but you can hear the audio of them. So most of these are actually out there. And of course, the actual episodes we did together. This one, Redgrass Field, and we did Barristan 2 of Winds of Winter. That was only a few months ago, and we had a great time with that. And of course, as we mentioned before, it links up, a lot of the themes of that one link up with this one.
Have we been on a panel together, Jim?
Have you guys?
I'm trying to think. Yes, we have been on a panel. I want to say it was at Con of Thrones.
Yeah, it was like I really thought we were, and I couldn't remember what it was on.
Was it Sworn Brothers and Sisters?
Or was it on Swords? Was it on Valyrian Steel?
Oh yes, Valyrian Steel. That was the one.
Okay,
that was the Valyrian, because we were also. It was supposed to get the.
We were supposed to have one of the swords.
Weapons.
The weapons master.
The weapons master from the actual show, but he had at the last minute, he got a new gig, and that's the sort of gig where you.
Yeah.
Well, that's the sort of industry where you really can't turn.
Yeah.
Where you can't turn down work.
No.
It really is, and it's a shame, but I mean, good for him.
Yeah. Work in that business means like months and months and months of work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just found the link to that the episode, the actual bonus episode that I did. I threw it in the chat.
And I think maybe the actual first thing we worked on, I think this maybe predates the Redgrass Field episode. Maybe not. I actually forget the dates. This is the book, Hymn for Spring, that we worked on with.
Yeah, no, that was the first thing we ever worked on.
And Stefan Sasa and Amin from Podcast of Ice and Fire. That was really good. That's
that book's out of print now, sadly.
You can still get an e-copy, but yeah, that's that was fun because. We get to say we're authors now. We're published authors.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually on my resume.
Yeah, heck yeah. So that's a good thing. That was a lot of fun things. We got to work with great people, and we got to, get to put a little feather in our cap at the same time. Okay, well, that's it for the nostalgia. Let's talk about the next section here in the episode. One of the things that is really important is coming up. It's going to be a part of the Mystery Night. It's also part of the world building that extends well beyond this story is the Krakens, Dagon Greyjoy. Well, I'll take Nina's lead here. As though the realm needed any more problems besides plague and famine and drought, Sir Bennis and Dunk informed the reader that the Ironborn have been raiding on the west coast, burning and pillaging as they please, even down to the Arbor. It's hardly surprising that Dagon Greyjoy would take the opportunity to do so, of course. Not only does the realm lack a strong popular executive authority, and not only are they focused on the east, but the combined disasters of famine, drought, and plague have crippled or eliminated altogether effective resistance on a local and national scale. And of course, this is what they are supposed to do culturally, religiously. They're supposed to attack the weak. And there's all sorts of things making people weak. There's all sorts of defenselessness this is pretty much what Balon thought he could do. After Robert's rebellion, he's like, okay, the realm is disunited. Robert doesn't actually have a handle on everyone. Now's the time. He was wrong. Dagon Greyjoy was not wrong. So this is a big deal. And this, like you said, this gives fuel to the argument that Bloodraven is not a good ruler / not paying attention properly. Yeah. What do you think?
He's leading the realm to ruin. I mean, it's just, whether as, Balon's rebellion ironically helps consolidate Robert's rule because it's a big successful victory. He's able to bring the coalition together.
Good point, yeah.
And I mean, and this includes the, people that were his former enemies. And whereas the, Bloodraven not doing anything against Dagon Greyjoy gives more fuel to the Blackfire rebellion. And we hear it with Sir Kyle the Cat. And he says, at least they fight. He's talking about Lannister and Stark. At least they fight.
At least they're trying,
Yeah, it's like, what does he do? He does nothing. King Aerys does nothing, and Bloodraven whispers into his ear. And it's like, well, I mean, because that's the thing, is that even if you just try, and I'm not saying that, let's just say that for the sake of argument, Bloodraven is right, and that if he does go west, Bittersteel invades in the east. There's a lot more things he can do between full-on invasion of the Iron Islands and nothing.
Yes.
He could have offered tax liens or tax forgiveness to houses Lannister and Stark, so they have a bigger war chest. Yep. He could have, given them a gift of ships, for example, loaned, for example, the Lannister Navy to have more ships to get a detachment from the royal fleet. There's so many things he could have done. Now, and he did nothing.
To be fair, some of these things he might have done. Like, I don't think he sent ships. That we would know about. But if he gave them some tax liens, I'm not sure the rank and file commoners would know about that. But still, the perception is he's done very little. And he definitely didn't do enough.
We'd have to see it for sure. But, I mean, given that Bloodraven is really the kind of guy who goes whole hog on everything, I'm willing to believe he did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. It does seem to, especially because it was difficult. Like with these other factors, it would be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Westeros is bleeding.
Yeah. At
this point, so it's not like there's a lot in the tank. And the thing is, Dagon knows that there's not a lot in the tank, which is why he's doing it.
And it's to emphasize how big a deal this is. Dagon has been raiding since before the story started, since before the Sworn Sword. He's been raiding, and he's still raiding well into the next story, if not beyond that. Definitely beyond that. So any sort of ill will directed towards Bloodraven over his inaction is only getting stronger, more intense, and is going to linger in memory longer because it was a thing for so long. And
it's probably going to be Egg that ends up handling the problem, either Egg or Maekar. Because this quote is, it's like, he was able to outrun the wolf and beard the lion in his den, but no one could stop the dragons.
Yeah,
which suggests that it's a Targaryen effort. But it would be interesting to see if if Egg and Dunk end up signing on to the combined Stark Lannister effort, and actually doing stuff. I mean, that would be kind of an interesting thing. I mean, we don't know about. Baron Stark and who is it? It's
Daemon's. It's Tybolt, I think, at this point.
Tybolt, Tybolt Lannister. We know nothing about Tybolt Lannister except he lost a joust once.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see this character, as well as give a window into the Stark, essentially the Winterfell conflict, because these half brothers of Stark are dropping like flies in every single revolt and stuff like that. And if the theory that Atwell was talking about is true, where these are actually proxy conflicts in the Winterfell War, that would be really interesting. Because we see in the first chapter with Bran, or not with Bran, with Bran and with Robb later, the Northern Lords are not these, super paragons of honesty. They wheel and deal just like everyone else does. Yeah. They're just a little more overt about it.
Yeah. So on the way from Old Town to Dorne, or rather, other way around, on the way to Old Town from Dorne, I kind of got confused about this in a prior episode, because this happens before this story, they go from Dorne to Old Town, and they get attacked by Dagon's raiders, and they have to fight. Dunk actually helps, but we aren't told that until the next story. That's why I got confused because it should be something we're told in this story, but it isn't actually told to us into the middle of the next story.
Yeah, but because it's right after the spring sickness was over,
right?
Because they waited it out
smartly,
but and that's good. But then it gives us the question of where's the Red Wine Navy in this whole Dagon Greyjoy affair?
Exactly. What's the Reach doing throughout any of this? It's kind of confusing. Not confusing, but it's like, it's an interesting mystery here. Now we hear that they raid as far south as the Arbor, and no one goes that far south raiding again until Euron. And one of the first examples we see of that is Sam and Gilly sail right past that on a similar route that Dunk and Egg would have taken because they're sailing around Dorne towards Old Town. Of course, Dunk and Egg actually came out of Dorne, but this is basically the same route. And they see evidence of battle. They don't know it's Euron's ships, but they know it's Ironborn ships because, well, they can tell. And this is very similar. Euron, unlike his brother, picked the right time to do the Ironborn depredations along the coast.
And he's also got crazy super magic,
drugs, and all this other stuff. Yeah, he's got he's just a whole nother type. He's a leveled up.
The Forsaken is straight up a metal. Like there's the horror, and it's also a metal out. I mean that the Impaled Gods. That's basically a metal album cover.
Yes, it is. And the name, the Forsaken sounds like a metal band, right?
I'm looking forward to whatever blood magic, what the fuckery is going on.
Yeah. And another funny thing about this, so by the time the mystery comes around, like we said, another year will have passed, and by the time A Song of Ice and Fire comes around, the main story, there's going to be lots of ships and humans named after Dagon Greyjoy. We've covered it, here and there. We bring it up. This name pops up so often. 2 ships in the Iron Fleet currently are named after him, and a distant cousin in Asha's group who was killed at Deepwood Motte. And it's also mentioned, here's a quote, that children on Fair Isle to this day are told that Dagon will come get them if they don't behave. It's kind of like Lady Went and her, or Lady Loston and her bats. It's kind of the same.
Yeah, we'll snatch up the bad children.
And here's Dunk and Egg actually talking about it at the end here.
We could go to Fair Isle, sir, the boy said as they were gathering up their things. If they're being raided by the Iron Men, Lord Farman might be looking for some swords.
Have you ever been to Fair Isle?
No, sir, Egg said, but they say it's fair. Lord Farman's seat is fair, too. It's called Fair Castle.
Yeah, well, they're making it sound real nice, but it's like it's a place that's perhaps been raided over the years more than any other place by the Ironborn. So it is nice, but also it's kind of dangerous.
He wouldn't be the first Targaryen to go, chill out there, though.
That's a good point. The Queen in the West. Yeah, she hung out there for a while, worried about Maegor, who was just too busy doing other stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Too busy killing.
Yeah, too busy being Maegor, too busy being cruel. So let's talk about how the dispute is resolved. We'll certainly be coming back to Dagon in the next story because, of course, he's going to maintain a place in the story. But that's unless you have anything else to add about it, we can move on.
No, I'm looking forward. Just that I'm looking forward to the resolution of that conflict.
Yeah, I wonder if we're actually. It seems like we probably.
I'm hoping for some
screen, but that would be interesting if we did.
Oh no, I'm really hoping that we get at least a short snippet of some Black Sails adventure.
Ooh,
that's we need a rollicking adventure pirate tale.
That would be cool. Yeah, if we're doing all the different versions of like genres of story, they could get on a ship and do some of that.
Yeah, good old fashioned pirate.
You
tale.
know what they could do? Fantasy genre.
Whoa, the fantasy genre.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I don't. That's too much of a stretch.
That just got too. That's too meta for me.
So I'll have take another lead from Nina here to take us into the next spot. They're walking towards the sort of showdown / confrontation. Now we talked about the wood burning before, but here's another take on it, a different look at it, and how it's a sort of a lead in to the Field of Fire, more nostalgia, more historical allusions here. It's used less for simple comparison and more to highlight the continuing theme of past Osray glory and the perils of their fortune. It was the dragons, literal and dynastic, who on the Field of Fire ended the Gardener Kings, who would raise the Osgrays to Marshals of the North March. So the ones who raised them up died, and with that, their decline began sort of in concert, or it kicked off their decline in turn. So Eustace notes in that aftermath, Highgarden passed from kings to stewards, and the Osgreys dwindled and diminished. So in his mind, as the rightful seat of the Gardener Kings was taken over by the Tyrells, so did the Osgreys lose their rightful place. The parallels are pretty straightforward once you look at them. A new Dragon King, unloved by the current Osgrey, as Aegon the Conqueror probably was by his Osgrey ancestor, because they obviously were more loyal to the Gardeners, right, versus the Dragons at the time, 300 years ago, or at this time, 200 years ago. So he's given the Osgrey lands and watered their neighborhoods, and it's under that king that these Webbers supposedly have destroyed the Osgrey's wood and all that. So that's an important framing of the scene, because Egg's dragon heritage is revealed a few moments later too. So it's kind of all happens in concert. Dunk uses it as sort of a last-ditch effort to stop the violence. He doesn't show it to everyone. He just shows it to Lady Rohan only. And just take a look at that. Notably, the ring doesn't fit her. That may be a little symbolism there. She's going to marry one lion and then another, after all. But of course, the ring doesn't work. It's not enough. She's like, yeah, well, all I got to do is just not kill that boy.
Yeah.
And then, I can still go ahead with my plan of overrunning y'all and seizing Bennis, as long as we don't kill that kid, which shouldn't be that hard to avoid killing a kid, considering how outnumbered they are. But
yeah, and they've only got they've only got 20 people going with them too, so it's really easy. It's not like it's a big chaos of battle.
Yeah. It's not 100 versus 100. It's they're just massively overwhelmed. So
also, it's really easy to pick out the kid.
Yeah.
It's like, don't kill the kid.
Yeah. And she really explains her situation quite well. She breaks it down. Like we've talked about it, like how hard it would be for a woman in a spot like this where men just assume the woman is weak, and weakness is both an invitation to attack and a sign that you're weak. If you don't seize other people's weakness, it might indicate that you're weak. It's really this sort of weakness cycle. Yeah, it's like it's a never-ending cycle of showing strength. So let's have this quote, Ashea.
No one burned.
No, not that one.
Oh.
Those pissing contests.
Those pissing contests are how lords judge one another's strength, and woe to any man who shows his weakness. A woman must needs piss twice as hard if she hopes to rule, and if that woman should happen to be small. Lord Stackhouse covets my horseshoe hills. Sir Clifford Conklin has an old claim to Leafy Lake. Those dismal Durwells live by stealing cattle. And beneath mine own roof I have the Long Inch. Every day I wake wondering if this might be the day he marries me by force.
And again, following in chronological order, the Long Inch, when he's told he has to fight Dunk in a trial by combat, gets mad and says, fine, but as soon as this is over, I'm marrying you. So yeah, he's right there. She's right. And as Sefton says at the beginning of the confrontation, the king's not going to know about this dispute. He's not going to care either. Nor is he going to care about some of these other disputes. They're just too small scale for him to worry about. And just to back this up a little more, she says it's a pissing contest. It's because that's what Dunk tells her. He's like, yeah, one time I was with Sir Arlen and he got hired for this. And Sir Arlen said, yeah, it's just no one's going to do anything. It's just a pissing contest. That's not entirely true, though, is it? It is sort of a pissing contest, but that's not quite right.
It's feudalism is all about, holding the land in protection. So you have to be able to protect and maintain your lands. Yeah. And if someone conquers you, then right of conquest is, well, you were too weak to actually hold these lands. So I have to take them because I'm the only one who can hold it.
Yeah.
And so, it is a pissing contest in the sense that a lot of it is flexing and power projection, but it's also not a pissing contest because there are very real consequences. The entire thing about a pissing contest is that there are no consequences. It's a meaningless show of strength. But it actually has very real consequences, not just for the people who live in there who might get killed in a chevauchée, but, for these people as well who lose. I mean, if she loses, Horseshoe Hills, I mean, maybe there's a mine or something there, or it's, the Leafy Lake, yeah. Maybe there's a fishery there or something like that. That's actually income that she needs.
Yeah, and as well, it's a sign of if you can't defend your realm, like you said, then someone could want to take it. It's also like if you lose to someone, if you show up to the pissing contest and you do poorly, well, then it shows that you're weak. So you're right. It's like it is a pissing contest, but there's a lot that they read into that. It does say a lot, even if to some people they can't tell what's going on. It's like the way these lords and ladies dress for their station. A lot of this nuance is lost by people who aren't in that culture. But one of the things we talk about is how much like certain emblems or the regality of your dress reflects your station. If you dress above your station, people will react to that. Or if you dress below your station, people will react to that. So yeah, this is very highly developed culture here that we're seeing, even though it's not really something that is super common in modern times. It's very real, and it was a big part of the real world as well in older times. Now, so this combination of nostalgia. Actually, backing up a little bit. The real pissing contest was Dagon Greyjoy when he was told, "Can you put a hearth fire out with just peeing?" So we have had a real pissing contest in this story.
And didn't he say it's like? And he's like, they bet me against a flock or some goats.
Yeah.
And I won, and those goats were delicious.
So ridiculous, but hilarious. So Dunk has this really clever diffusing of the situation. He's like, all right, fine. You gotta show your strength. Well, how about this for strength? He cuts his cheek. He's like, everyone sees it. A cheek for a cheek. It's a pretty good line, actually. Yep. But so she's like, all right, that she thinks he's a little crazy, but she smiles and is like, all right, that's good enough for me, actually. Yeah. But then Eustace is like, no, you burned down my wood. You burned down my wood. And she says,
no one burned the wood, she said. But if some man of mine had done so, it must have been to please me. How could I give such a man to you?
A lot of people have made this excuse throughout history. It's a good excuse. Like, how can you prove otherwise? Like, I didn't order him to do it, but he must have done it to please me. There's some other historical examples of that one. Maybe won't someone rid me of this turbulent priest? You know, like examples like that of someone just claiming, oh, I didn't actually say it. I was just exclaiming. Yeah. Kind of the old mafia boss line, like, yeah, I didn't give that order. Yeah. And how would they prove otherwise, you know?
Yeah. But the problem is that even though it's like, it seems like it's got a way out for everybody, the problem is now Eustace is in the pissing contest, because if somebody burned down his woods, now he's the one that can't defend his land. So it really, so it's not like, I mean, you know, yes, you can say that Eustace is has more fault and he's a lot less blameless, but he still has the problem with, you know, he's got such a minuscule thing lands, but he has to be able to defend them. Otherwise he's going to lose what little bit he has left.
Good point. Yeah.
And then, you know, it seems like he did, but I mean, you know, you mentioned here, it's like he wants to die with a sword in hand. And it's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense that he does, because he's just watched as his family has just crumbled all the way to ruin. And, you know, the greatest moment of his life was in the Redgrass field, and that's ages past, and now he's just shuffling along, decrepit.
And he wishes he died. He like laments.
Why not die sword in hand, just like Damond Blackfire did before?
And when else will he get a chance to do that? Right? Like, when is he going to have another chance to legitimately fight with, you know?
So far from me to be to say, hey, you know, there's a guy raiding the West Coast.
We were just talking about the Ironborn. Like, if you want to go sword in hand, they need some help over there. Yeah. And let's also not forget, though, it puts Lady Webber in a bind, because, as we said before, if Eustace dies without a male heir, his lands go to the crown. And Lady Webber's neighbor becomes the crown instead of weak Eustace. So that she doesn't want that. Yeah. Like, they might not let her keep the dam up, for example.
Yeah. Or they might even they say, well, look, you got the Checky water because Osgreys were traitors, but there's no more Osgreys, and I was a loyalist. So no. Yeah. You don't get the Checky water anymore.
She does not want to take that chance of the king giving those lands to some good friend of his, and you know, then who was always going to take their side.
Yeah. There's just no way that if that's the way it goes, there's no way that it ends where she's not worse off.
Yeah. So she makes probably the only move she can make, and it's smooth, it's clever.
Oh yeah.
It's really smooth. Like, if she wins, well, then she wins, right? Then good. Like, the trial by combat goes her way. And if she loses, then Lucas Inchfield's dead. And she's happy with that. Like, that's a great thing. So this is a real win-win for her. So it's part of, like, showing how clever she is, because this was great. And then, of course, she would still have to, in the scenario of losing the trial by combat, she would still have to pay him some sort of indemnity for the burned woods. Admit that, okay, well, the trial by combat says I'm guilty, so I got to pay you something. It would just be money, though, right? It wouldn't be like she wouldn't lose face.
It's just weregild. Yeah, it's just weregild.
So that'd be worth it to get rid of Sir Lucas. Like, can I pay a sack of silver to get rid of this guy? Actually, that's a pretty good deal. So, and then she even gets out of that. She doesn't even have to end up paying for the woods because they get married. And it's just like, well, that's my land. This is our land now, so I don't owe you anything. So it's super smooth. It's almost like we'll get to this in a minute. Let's talk more about the actual fight here. As we discussed in the Hedge Knight, the action here or there was a blending of Brienne's fight versus Loras, and so is this one, including an element of unrealized romance. But as for the action, Lucas Longinch wields a long axe like Brienne did, and Loras wielded a morning star, which that was mirrored by Aerion. Aerion lost his morning star, and here Dunk loses his sword. And Brienne and Dunk used their ace in the hole, the old tackle and grapple play.
Yeah.
Being larger
which works
than
out
the other
because
guy.
they're bigger. Yep. Because they're bigger. Yep.
Brienne's much bigger than Loras. Dunk is bigger than Long. It's maybe not a lot bigger, but bigger. And
not as much.
And way more experienced at it, though. Like, you don't get the sense that many people are Dunk's match in skill. Like, forget the size.
Yeah. And he probably, he had been in scraps and flea bottom for his whole life. So
you could.
And it's. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say that. So if it's Lucas Longinch, that it's Dunk Longfoot.
Longer inch.
Possible.
It's a foot,
but,
not an inch.
Yeah. But it's also where this is also ties into the class thing. I mean, it would happen in the Hedge Knight where it's like, Aerion could beat Dunk the Hedge Knight. He couldn't beat Dunk of Flea Bottom.
Yes.
And it is using the lower class move, the move that's not the honorable thing, which is kind of weird because it's like, actually, in combat training, they studied pancration all the time in the Middle Ages. Yeah. They studied wrestling. It was part of the thing. But it's like, it's not the showy, honorable swords duel, and the sword is the weapon of the warrior. No. This is tussling in a stream.
Yeah.
This is hardcore low class stuff, and that's where Dunk is in his element because that's what he's been all his life.
Yeah. Great catch by Julie A. She points out that Brienne also holds Jaime's head underwater after she beats him in their short duel right before they're captured by Vargo Hoat's men. So of course she obviously doesn't drown him, but she threatens to. She's like, "Look, man, you've lost. Give up already. I'm holding your head underwater." Of course, Dunk has to go through the actual killing of his foe. So obviously a difference there. But there's a small pattern emerges here as well. Egg in all three stories, as you said, just like the Western theme where there's a sort of a climactic duel at the end, in keeping with that. Egg is watching all three times. Every time he yells, "He's right there," which is kind of an odd thing to yell as an encouragement, but I love it. It's quirky. It's endearing. I like it. It's like, he's right there.
I think he's right there. I think his meaning is like he's open.
Yeah. So it's great. I love that. I hope we get that continue. I hope we have more "he's right there's" in our future. And here's another recurring pattern. Dunk's very thick head. Multiple times he takes blows to the head. Keeps on ticking. Here's a quote.
A broken ankle, a sprained knee, a broken collarbone, bruising. Your upper torso is largely green and yellow, and your right arm is a purply black. I thought your skull was cracked as well, but it appears not. There is that gash in your face, sir. You will have a scar, I fear. Oh, and you had drowned by the time we pulled you from the water.
Yeah, he's like, I drowned?
What dead will never die.
Yeah, so. But, Ironborn Maester come to the rescue there, so there you go. So this brings back a theme that is omnipresent throughout A Song of Ice and Fire, especially in Brienne and Jaime chapters, which is the line told to Jaime by Arthur Dane. It's a great symbolic line. So much work is done by this line. All knights must bleed. And, well, whether it's minor bleeding like the face cut or this huge beating he takes, it's just very well expressed here.
Well, Arthur Dane said it too. Blood is the seal of our devotion.
Oh, yeah. And here's another line that Arlen tells Dunk that's completely in line with that concept.
A knight had to learn to live with aches and pains, the old man used to say. Aye, lad, and with broken bones and scars. They're as much a part of knighthood as your swords and shields.
Now, Dunk seems to just fully accept this. He's like, he is kind of a born warrior, right? He's just like, yeah, that's how it is, all right. Yep. Where's the lie, right? Great catch by Nina here as well. She points out that some of our seminal are they or are they not knights, or their struggle with knighthood, their argument with knighthood, their, just dancing around the concept of knighthood in different ways. Dunk, Brienne, and Sandor all have significant facial scarring. Dunk probably has the smallest scar of the three. He only has a cheek cut, although it's a pretty severe cut. Brienne's face is like chewed off partly, and Sandor's is burned off. I mean, I don't know which of those is worse. I guess I don't even know. I don't know. I'd rather have my face burned or eaten. Let's just not worry about that too much. They're both awful, and they're both very much going to be seen by anyone who sees them without their helmet on for the rest of their lives. It very much marks them as people who have experienced combat, although even though Sandor's was not in combat, he certainly has seen plenty of combat, has other scars to mark that. And yeah, there's just so much work done here. I mean, we could just talk about it forever. Just this knighthood theme, just the scars, the battle, the stories they tell. What would you anything to add on this concept, Jim?
No, I think it's just, the dramatic injury is always an important part of storytelling, and it's good. And it's good that, we're getting more Brienne and Dunk parallels, which are good because Brienne is his long lost secret descendant.
Yeah.
But I also find that it's funny that usually it's the female character that gets the less the less cosmetically disfiguring injury, but here it's the himbo.
Yeah.
But no, it is good. I really it's just a good catch that facial injuries, because you carry them with you.
Yeah.
And it's interesting about the blood because, and I know this from personal experience, head injuries don't clot the way other injuries do. And there's a good reason for that, is because you don't want a blood clot in your
brain.
Head.
Yeah, that's bad.
You don't really want that. So head injuries bleed a lot longer. So you actually have to press them and get them stitched, get them shut. Oh. And so it's interesting that these people get these serious injuries, which continue to show that seal of devotion, even though in Sandor's case, it's specifically a rejection of knighthood.
Yeah.
Because he gets the oils to help heal his face, and his psychopathic brother gets the oils from Rhaegar himself.
Yeah, like, what? That is just wrong. Yeah. And then framed with that, there's a little bit of comic relief. This story has good amounts of comic relief. Here's one of my favorites. When he's first waking up, he says, "Egg." He got out. "I want egg."
Hunger is a good sign, the maester said, but it is sleep you need now, not food.
No, and that's the thing. Sometimes a joke is really good when it comes to just, delivering a solid punchline. That was a good one. That was a really good one.
Speaking of good, Egg was a very good squire. In the document, I wrote it with the trademark symbol. Yeah. Very good squire trademark, because he's got vibes of Edric Dane and Adam Osgrey. I mean, he's standing over Dunk as he's injured, defending his body, while he's lying there.
He's just a good egg.
He is a good egg. You're right. And Edric Dane literally pulled Beric out of the water, which Egg did as well. He's like, he's stronger than he seems. He pulled you out of the water. Like, that does. Like, he's wearing armor and he's huge. Like, that would take a lot of strength.
Yep.
Wow. There's kind of a peculiar moment, too, after when he wakes up. Before the egg comment, he wakes up with the taste of blood in his mouth, with the smell of cloves and unguent, and the first thing he sees is ravens looking at him. I'm not sure that's meant to be a nod to Blood Raven watching, but it could be. It certainly fits as a bookend to the start of the story when they see ravens covering these cages. And then
I'm just wondering,
there's no birds anymore because the bodies are just skeletons at this point.
Is it a sly reference to when Jon was waking up after he killed the White?
Oh, yeah.
Castle Black?
That could be it. It could be, yeah. Also,
I mean, sometimes he just loves his little dig, his little throat. he loves to season it in with little references to earlier to other parts of the book.
That's a very good point. Yeah. What to think about that some more. So, folks, certainly weigh in if you've got takes on this mystery or any of the other ones. As always, I encourage you to let us know what you think.
Oh yeah, please always comment. It's always fun to hear from the community.
Yeah. Okay, so the departure is the next section here. That's when they're getting ready to leave, and Dunk has some of his strongest romance vibes with Rohan. Nina suggests this section should have been called "Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy," which is hard to argue with that. And this is about a happy ending as we can get. Like as far as the Song of Ice and Fire, George R. Martin's writings in general, it's rarely
definitely better than the Hedge Knight.
Yeah, right. That's like all sorts of awful things there. I mean, this is pretty much almost everything ends well here. Like they get to grieve together. It's a perfect solution. The marriage it works really well, even if the actual marriage doesn't work out. It's a great solution from like a legal standpoint and solving the problems. And the grieving is a real you got like. As far as therapy, like that was important for them to grieve openly and get that done. Even Rains, I mean, that's arguably the best part of all, right? I mean, we're talking about a drought that's been going on for a while, like months and months. Like if talk about what ifs, if this had happened sooner, like a lot of these problems wouldn't have happened, right? The fire wouldn't have caught probably. And anyway,
yeah, I mean, just the woods wouldn't have burned down. None of that bad stuff would happen. I mean, you don't even really need to worry about the dam so much if there's water everywhere.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So so many of these issues would have been resolved. The food would be there. No, yeah, there's just all these. It just goes on to show how much of the story was rooted in desperation, and how much that desperation is removed by just nature cooperating.
But then again, as we said back in the beginning with the Fisher King mythos, now that the land has healed, now that the people have healed, the land has healed.
Yeah.
And, that's the best ways now that obviously the drought's not over, because I don't know if you've ever been in an area with drought. When there is a rainstorm, all it ends up doing is creating a bunch of flash floods.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The soil doesn't just become rich all of a sudden. It just gets wet. Yeah.
Well, no, it doesn't get wet. The problem is it's all hard out.
That's true. It just flows on top. That's where the
water stays on the top. Yeah. That's why you get all those floods.
So, of course, he has this dream, this very, obviously a sex dream about Rohan, a love dream, a romance dream. And she's naked in it. I mean, she's shooting arrows at him. It's kind of Cupid-like. And there's an association of the legal stuff. So there's a lot of things mixed into it, like the fear, the panic, the how this is all going to resolve. He's anxious about it, but also he's into her. So it's more straightforward than a lot of dreams, even though it's got a lot of the similar like metaphor and symbolism that's common in literary dreams. Yeah. But there's less mystery in this one than I think in a lot of other dreams. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no. I mean, this one's pretty obtuse, but also, I mean, well, Dunk's obtuse anyway. But it's just a sex dream. But I mean, it kind of wraps up with Dunk being a himbo and also sexually frustrated. Because he never found what's her name, Tonsel Too Tall.
Not yet, at least, and it does also sort of maybe give him a little extra strength to fight Lucas Longinch. Gives him a little boost there, powering up his.
Jorah won that tournament, motivated by the power of love.
Hey, good point. Very good point. That was that's a great catch. And of course, there's so much innuendo here. It's another part of the story that's just so funny. It's just George.
Oh yeah, I mean, it couldn't have been. The only way it could have been more overt is if when she was shooting him, she was trying to give him the little death. I mean, it really was overt. But again, that's okay. I mean, there was a lot of George R. R. Martin does a lot of symbolism and fun things, and just like with House Manwoody, sometimes you just need to hit him on the jaw. Just a straight jab. Why not?
Yep. Okay, so this quote is this is maybe Ashaya, this is one of your favorites, right?
Yeah, I put it as the quote for our weekly discussion post, actually, randomly.
Go ahead. Here we go.
It is good to see you on your feet.
You never saw me on my back, he thought. Milady, what brings you to the stables? It's a wet day for a ride.
I might say the same to you.
It's a wet day for a ride.
Oh, my God.
Oh man,
this is where anybody's you're flirting.
Yeah, it's like their last chance to flirt, so they better get it in while they can.
Yep.
That's what she said. And then she says,
"You have large feet," she observed. "Large hands as well. I think you must be large all over."
She's clearly talking about his kidneys, right?
Yeah.
That's the organ she's referring to.
Yeah, what's that? What do they say about guys with big feet?
Yeah.
They've got big shoes.
Yep. The final conversation between Dunk and Rohan is fittingly very flirty. This is another great take from Nina. They have both been trying to avoid each other because they know that they're attracted to each other, and it's like, well, they know they can't consummate it, but they kind of can't help each other. So this is kind of like dancing around what they want to do. Their attraction is really pulling them in a direction that they know that they can't go. They both recognize the impassable gulf of rank between them, is how she puts it. That's a good way to phrase it. Emphasizing their unrequited love, Dunk wryly noting that he could marry the dead Alysanne Osgray. Rohan would be his lady mother. But she has to explain, she has to marry in terms of her will. Her will won't, the will that her father imposed won't allow that. He thinks, I bet she's freckled all over. Yeah, we know what he means by that. All these different innuendos. It's just nonstop. It's great. And even the horse. This is one I didn't actually catch. Nina points out that the horse that she tries to give him is pretty much her in horse form. Yeah. It's red. It's named Flame. It's a fancy horse, But, and so fittingly, he rejects the horse too, just because he can't have her. He can't have this fancy horse. He would rather have the braid, which is pretty cool because it speaks to who he is, his hedge knight nature. He doesn't want this fancy horse, even though horses are necessary to be a knight. The memory of this event, the connection to her, the braid has more meaning to him. It's more part of the hedge knight's life. I think it fits him more.
Yeah, and it's romantic too.
Yeah, it is romantic.
It really is.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas it's like you can't. There's no. I mean, flame is useful. There's literally no reason. There's no practical reason for the. It's a memento of the experience they had.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. The entire thing is just hugely flirty. And it's interesting too that the horse he does take later is egg is rain, and it's the rain that fell, the solution. And they're now taking the solution with them. The resolution of it is with them. So now they're walking away from the event. They've got and it's a physical representation of essentially here's the lesson we learned.
Yeah,
it's rain. And because how did they bond together? Because they reigned over the graves. The blackberry patch with crying.
Nice.
How did the drought end? With rain. And so, like I said, it's the resolution of all the events, and now they march off into the sunset.
Yeah. And building on what you said before about Jorah and wearing
the token.
This braid is sort of like a permanent version of that. Like he carries that around. He'll always be like, it'll pump him up a little bit, something to remind him. Way more than the horse will. The horse might help him in other ways. Well, it definitely would have helped him in other ways, but it wouldn't give him like this personal inspiration, like this inner fire, this valor that he can draw on. His horse isn't going to do that for him. It would be more of an external value, which is still something significant, but morale, as we know, is more important in battle. So that's pretty cool. A very neat way for George to wrap this up. But also the braid is very symbolic culturally. Now we can't. It's a very open to interpretation because braids are one of the oldest things for the way people adorn themselves, the way people manage their personal appearance. And it's a really neat cultural thing in the sense that these cultural traditions have been maintained for a long time because braiding hair. It's usually women, but plenty of men have their hair braided. Obviously, that's a thing. It's even to this day, it's very personal, very social because there's not some machine that braids your hair. It's still a hands-on thing, 99% of it. The technology of braiding hasn't really changed that much over the years. People figured this out a long time ago, and it's still pretty much how it's done. People come up with new ways to do braidings, but it's mostly developed a long time ago. Most in Western culture, a lot of it represents things like mourning or widowhood or being unmarried, all of which applies to Rohan, right? She should be in mourning, sort of culturally she should be in mourning. I'm not saying she should be in mourning, but that's what culture expects of her because she's been widowed. And of course, so she is a widow and she's currently unmarried. So, although actually by the time Dunk takes the braid, she technically has just gotten married. So it kind of is fitting to ditch the braid in that sense. But what I mean by the interpretation being very broad is because there's so many different cultural meanings across every culture ever about what braids mean. I'm talking about real world cultures. It's open to the reader to kind of have their own sense of what it means, to look at this and be like, oh yeah, it also means this or this and this, because braids are so wide open to interpretation.
I was just going to say, I was typing in the chat, so I don't honestly know if you guys brought this up, but it was brought up. Do you guys think of this as wrong, creepy, weird for him to take the braid? Do you guys think at all about that?
It was a little awkward. Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Like he read her correctly because she wasn't mad by it.
She wasn't mad about it, but as a reader, I think reading that at a meta level, it comes off strangely.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I think I just interpreted it as kind of like the lady's favor, the token of knighthood.
I think
just, it would be a lot more creepy. It's like, oh, I'm going to take some of your hair. I mean, that's obviously stalker territory.
And it was a real thing, was they would give someone a lock of their hair but just forcefully taking a woman's braid, that is a real fetish that men have, is doing that sort of thing. So you could see why women are not so into it.
Yeah, I could understand that. But it looks like she didn't take it as gross and fetishy. So thank goodness.
Yeah.
I
still want to like Dunk.
a similar, Nina suggests like a couple of somewhat similar situations. For example, when Sandor demands a song from redheaded Sansa, it's a little similar, although Sansa's actually very uncomfortable by this, and whereas Rohan is accepting of it. And of course, there's also, just an example of how different cultures see this, in world, a Dothraki would be like, this is horrifying. Like, she just won. Well, actually, she did lose, kind of the trial by combat. She lost, so I guess actually it does fit in that sense. But it is fitting in that regard because she lost. Yeah. But so he claimed her braids. Hey, it kind of works in that sense. Like, he's like, hey, I won this. It's like, hey, we're not Dothraki. We were just talking about horses, but hold on there. Wait a second. In terms of Into the Sunset, that is how it ends. We've got the final quote here, but before that, we know George, we've discussed this already. George gives a kind of a nod and a wink about Tenzel, about eventually finding her. Bennis the Brown Sheard, who knows? He may or may not ever encounter him again. It would be nice if Bennis got justice, but it isn't always George's way to wrap everything up so nicely. Some people do, in the real world, escape justice, and Bennis might be...
He also was just like Bender from Futurama.
Yeah.
When because it's like after the college episode, when they do the credits roll, and it's like, his mission accomplished. Bender stole everything of value and left. And it's like, that's exactly what Bennis of the Brown Shield did.
Good point. So here's basically the last line, or last lines, and we'll use this as our outro as well. Summerhall is south. Your father...
The wall is north.
Dunk looked at him. That's a long way to ride.
I have a new horse, sir.
So you do, Dunk had to smile. And why would you want to see the wall?
Well, said Egg, I hear it's tall.
That's true. Yes, it is. It is indeed. It is tall. So it sounds like they're heading towards the wall, but which might mean, which is sort of a hint that it was going to be the She-Wolves of Winterfell next.
Notably, we got our clarification. I asked Nina. It is not confirmed that the village hero is book 4.
Okay.
What we do know is that he said there's no telling when I will have time to finish either of these or which one I will write first. I don't expect I will know more until I've delivered the Winds of Winter.
Okay, cool.
So it could be either.
So it was premature of me to say that the wiki was wrong. It's just the wiki, we shouldn't know.
The wiki should. The wiki is wrong in that it shouldn't call it book 4.
It should
that is not confirmed.
Okay. Gotcha.
It says we don't know which one's going to be book.
Yeah, but, it's going to be one of those two, though.
Yeah.
To be fair, Standfast is in the Reach, and there's a lot of places that are north.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if the village hero is in Pennytree is also north.
Yeah, so they could be on the way, but obviously they could go to north and then come back. There's so much time. Yeah. I mean, they're... This is very early in their lives, so...
Yep, and we also have George R. R. Martin travel times sometimes. Sometimes they are a little wiggy. So,
Guilty Undertaker says Rohan's the grandmother, Tywin, and the great-grandmother of Jaime, Cersei, and Tyrion, right? She's quite Tyrion-like in the story. Oh, yeah. Shay, you made some notes here.
Trial by combat. They're both short, snarky, generally just very clever.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, that's a great catch that they are very connected. Yeah, I mean,
they're both, you know, they have a highborn person with a lowerborn person that they can't be with. It's, you know, kind of a star-crossed lovers type of thing.
People sort of look down on them, not just because of their height, because of their certain aspects of like people. There's rumors about them.
She's a woman, and he's, you know, a dwarf.
The dwarf. Yep.
Yeah, that's a really good catch.
Yeah, Guilty Undertaker. I definitely really like that.
I could probably do a parallel lives about that one.
Yeah, you should. We spoiled it. You can't do it for another.
Yeah, I think now you can't do it. Now you have to wait. You have to wait till it evaporates from the consciousness.
That's right. Shh! No one heard me say that. No. Dornish James says also with Dunk Rohan versus Johnny Grit, there's a reversal of commonborn man / highborn woman to highborn man / commonborn woman. Oh yeah.
And two redheads.
Both are,
yeah, exactly.
And both Archer girls.
Yeah, both Archer.
Oh, good
point. Redheads as well. Yep. That's very true. Good catch. Well, once again, the History of Westeros commenters, the community comes through with some excellent takes, some excellent catches, some great questions that set us off in new directions. And, well, I can't get enough of it. We'll keep them coming. Thanks a lot, Jim. This was a great discussion. We learned a lot. You, as always, had some great takes, some things that none of us have considered, some things that maybe we had considered but didn't know very well that you helped illuminate even more. Any last words or anything you want to shout out or just say?
No, I mean, I'm just saying, that's why I like this community that we're all a part of. And, each of us have our own little different backgrounds and histories. And so, you're at Ice and Fire Con, you're talking about something and somebody comes in with hey, what about this? And it's like, what do you mean? And then you explain something and then 10 minutes later, you've learned this crazy new thing.
Yep.
And that happens at the cons. And man, I'm really itching for cons.
Right.
So, COVID's been killing us.
It is. It's stupid COVID,
Yeah. Hopefully we get some cons back in, but it was great working out with you again. And we did fix what we did last time when we talked about it last time when we said, maybe I need to be on more often because we had the tech problems from the Barristan episode. So the promise was kept.
That's right, and I'm sure we have plenty more episodes due together / panels. I'm sure the future is bright. We'll definitely be doing more together, both live and on streams. So keep just stick with us, folks. We'll keep them coming. Also mentioned in this episode, besides our previous episodes with Jim, Barristan 2, Redgrass Field, panels, Hymn for Spring. We also talked about our Summer Hall episodes. We mentioned probably some other stuff. I don't remember exactly, but we'll be starting the the Mystery Night shortly. Sean will be returning for that. And if you aren't aware, the current date is August 15th as of this recording, and we have just finished recording part 4 of the Dance with Dragons with Radio Westeros. It's currently up for patrons and will be delivered for everyone else shortly, so keep an eye out for that as well.
Yeah, I was going to listen to it, but I had to prep for this episode first.
All right, well, now we can do that next.
That's gonna be my Monday.
Right on, cool. Well, thanks again, Jim. Thanks, Ashea. Thanks everyone who came and attended this live. Thanks to everyone who sent questions ahead of time. Thanks to Nina for her excellent takes. Thanks to our mods over on the Facebook group. Thanks to everyone who comments on Flick and Slack and Discord and Facebook. Thanks to Michael Klarfeld for our video intro and the maps you see behind us. Thanks to Kevin McLeod for the Valar Rereadis music. Thanks to Joey Townsend and Jesse Koval for our regular History of Westeros music. Thanks to the Bengineer for sound quality, mastering, and all that goodness. And what is Here Be Dragons doing today? Do we know? Maybe more Clone Wars or something like that. There's lots of Star Wars content these days going on.
I should have realized because they invited me, but I couldn't do it. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, Into the Spider-Verse.
That's just up there in my top 2 favorite comic book movies of all time.
Nice. That was such a fun flick.
That was so good. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, 100% watch it. Even if you're not into comic book anything, it's so worth it.
It's really
worth it.
Really good.
Yeah.
I won't say any more, but it's great.
Excellent blend of drama and comedy.
It's one of those movies you feel like 10, 15, 20 years from now, you can look back and be like, you can list all the movies that were influenced by Into the Spider-Verse.
That drew influence.
It has that feel of a movie that is going to change how other movies are made.
Watch the cinema wins on it too, because they specifically go into a lot of the different shot-by-shot compositions and the lighting and things like technical details that you just wouldn't know.
Yeah, it's beautiful animation, the style. It's so unique. It really.
Yeah. We're probably preaching to the choir, but just those few you maybe haven't checked it out.
Apparently we are not. We're preaching to Nina, who says, "I really need to watch it."
Oh yeah, Nina, definitely check that out.
Wild, Nina, go watch that right now.
Yeah, right now. Cool. Well, anyway, folks, we'll be back with more as usual. We'll keep them coming. Thank you all again, and Valar, Rereadis.